Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, my lord?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. While you rested in your cradle of power, you were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such time, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all.
You forbade me. Captain Honor, I do not know what strength is in my net. I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall. Our people fail. Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.
All right, guys, welcome to The Narrative, episode 30. No, Mrs. Bright, I do not want my coffee pop because it's out of coffee. There's no more coffee left, and I ran out of time to get more, so I just have lukewarm coffee. Anyway, this is episode 30 of The Narrative. I titled this one Patriot Games because we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff, and I don't know, I guess it's broadly relevant to the title I chose. Eventually, this will be a Lord of the Rings podcast. We all know it's going to happen, but probably not tonight. You know, I'll try to slip some in there every now and again. But, you know, for now, we're going to keep doing InfoWars stuff. We're going to keep talking about interesting geopolitics, sociopolitics, history, etc. We're going to talk about that stuff. So my guest tonight's going to be good about all that. Eventually, though, probably we all know where this is going, and that I'm just going to talk about Lord of the Rings most of the time. and I'll slowly get you guys all on board with that. But that's not tonight. It is not this night. So the format, the fake format that we may or may not follow tonight, as always on the narrative, we do the story right now in the first half. We do the theme and the thesis in the second half. Story right now, I named that one Patriot Games. And we're going to do a little bit of Epstein. We're going to touch on Epstein. But that's not really the focus of why I brought tonight's guest on. And I know you guys have probably been inundated with Epstein commentary all weekend, all last week, etc. So we're going to talk about some of that. We're going to talk about what's going on in Canada. We're going to talk about Sovereign Alliance, all that kind of stuff. Second half of the show, the theme and the thesis. In my notes, I named it Revisionist History. And I think that can go both ways, bicameral. I had a good discussion last week with Brad on Independence Day weekend. We spoke about the Founding Fathers. We talked about how base they were, etc. Perhaps even more so than this community maybe talks about even though we think we do. We kind of forget how badass these guys were. So we talked about that. We also touched on some figures that are not super popular, maybe in this community, maybe even with some of the other Founding Fathers. And I actually want to revisit that topic and hit it from a different angle tonight. So first half of the show, current narratives. Second half of the show, we're going to talk about some historical American founding narratives. We are still in July. We are still Independence Day month, Independence Day month. And I think it's just interesting stuff to revisit that maybe we're so focused on current narrative and the fake history playing out right now in front of our eyes that we don't often talk enough about real fake history, which is history from the past. So we will discuss that. And then third section of the show is largely you guys. I'm probably going to have my guests here for 90 minutes. We'll see where we stretch that, maybe a little bit. 90 minutes in Burning Bright time. And then we'll do a little Bright Brief section at the end. There's been a few times when I've done a little solo section. You guys have actually kind of liked it. That is when, in keeping with a commenter who was joking in the chat earlier, said, "Are we going tricameral tonight?" And in my little solo section at the end, in my notes, it says tricameral psyops. So yes, we are going tricameral. We may hurt ourselves, but you guys can hang out with me. In the meantime, if you want to support the show, if you want to ask a question for that last section there, we'll just kind of hang out and go back and forth, me and you guys, send over a rant. All rants get split with my guests for each week. All ads do, all that kind of stuff. Anytime you guys support this show, you are supporting me, you're supporting Badlands, you're supporting my guests. So much appreciate that. And before I bring my guest on, I'm going to thank tonight's sponsors. The first sponsor tonight is our friend Mike Lindell at MyPillow. Mike Lindell and MyPillow employees want to thank listeners for all the continued support. Mike has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of their life. He didn't stop by creating the best pillow. He created the best bed sheets ever. He's offering the best deal on his Percale bed sheets. You can get a set for as low as $24.98. The MyPillow Percale sheets are breathable and have a cool, crisp feel. They have deep pockets to fit over any mattress. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me, which is crucial for my busy schedule. Also, for a limited time, I imagine thinking I sleep. It's a cute narrative, speaking of narratives, but I appreciate the thought. For a limited time, when your order is over $100, you'll receive $100 in free digital gifts. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code BADLANDS. Receive a MyPillow Percale sheet for as low as $24.98, or call 1-800-795-5154 and use the promo code BADLANDS. Like many at Badlands, my house is mostly made of MyPillow stuff. I have a MyPillow mattress, MyPillow pillows, as I said last week, a MyPillow wife, a MyPillow dog, a MyPillow son. So, you can get all that kind of stuff. And our other sponsor tonight are our friends, very timely, at River BTC, River Bitcoin. Did you know that Bitcoin is now a top 5 global asset? That just happened this past week. Now's the time to buy, and River's here to help. Prepare to maximize your Bitcoin returns without the emotion. Introducing River AI, a Bitcoin advisor at your fingertips. Stop trying to time the market. Do it with confidence. At River, you get 0-fee recurring buys, 3.8% Bitcoin interest on cash, US-based support, business accounts, and so much more. Don't forget about Bitcoin interest on cash, which can accelerate your business growth. Businesses can now earn 3.8% interest on cash paid in Bitcoin. That's more money to fuel your next Bitcoin move. Get started at badlandsmedia.tv/river. Move your cash to River today and start earning a real interest rate with Bitcoin. The future is now. badlandsmedia.tv/river. For those wondering about the demise of our own G-Money, rumors of his demise have been greatly exaggerated. He's having a pretty good week with Bitcoin charts. He's traveling right now. He will be back. He may or may not be fleeing from several governments, but I think he will evade them and come back to Badlands at the turn of the tide. All-time high. We're currently above an all-time high, 119,000. As I've said before, I did not get into Bitcoin at $500. I infamously chose a shitcoin when offered Bitcoin or a shitcoin. I chose $500 worth of shitcoinage. Didn't get in until it was like 25 grand. It's never too late. If this is going to be one of the base layers, if not the base layer of money in the future, it's never too late. Just, dollar cost average, do what you want to do. And I don't think you'll regret it if you set it and forget it type of thing. Okay, without further ado, I am bringing on for the third time, I believe, Matthew Ehret, known Canadian savant, I suppose. So I guess that's a compliment. How you doing, man?
Yeah, usually it follows after the word idiot, so I appreciate just simply savant floating out there. I'll take it as a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm
doing good.
We'll let that part be implied. Right? My wife has taken to referring to me as neurodivergent recently, because I think she kept kind of getting close to calling me autistic so often that I think she was like, I need to reframe this. I need to make this a little bit more positive.
More progressive. But, yeah. That's it's a very, very high-minded, highbrow jab. It's good.
Exactly. I mean, being autistic is in these days, I feel like. We've taken it back. We've taken ownership of that stuff back. But excited for this discussion tonight, man. Matt's one of those guys. It's like, yeah, let's do, 90 minutes or something. I was like, let's do a burning bright 90 minutes. So it could be 91 minutes. But no, we'll have a good discussion tonight.
I'm Canadian, right? The exchange rate is a little bit, so I think 1 hour Canadian or 1 hour American exchange is for about 2 hours and a half Canadian. So that's
fair. I like the thinking there. Yeah. No, I actually kind of like, I'll do the 3.5 hour shows at times, obviously, depending on the conversation, depending on the subject matter and the time allocation that we've got. But I kind of like also going back and forth, like when we're planning to have either a 90-minute, 120-minute discussion or something like that, it keeps me more on rails of what I want to talk about. So I think that's actually a good thing tonight. I thought of having Matt on because we're going to do some current narratives. We're just going to touch on a few current narratives. And, then I want to get into some, I'd said in the intro, revisionist history. By the way, guys, please let me know in chat if my mic ends up screwing up. This plug keeps sucking, but I think we're good for now. So just let me know if that ends up getting messed up. But revisionist history, I think maybe to set the stage for that part of our discussion, I had Brad on last week on Independence Day weekend. We were talking about Sam Adams. We talked about Jefferson. We were talking about just the founding, the American Revolution, etc. And, I've got this feeling lately that in the flood of constant info war noise and current narrative, and here's the current thing, and here's the current situation, which I do all the time. We talk about this stuff all the time. We do sort of forget to look at the past and learn from it, which sounds extremely cliche. Obviously, Matt does breaking history with our own Ghost. Speaking of, are you guys shifting your time slot? Is that official yet?
Well, from what I'm gathering thus far is we're going to be doing for a limited time a breaking history extra second show per week on Thursday nights, 10 or 10:30 or something like that. But that's going to be a limited time only thing. Okay. But we're still keeping the Wednesday at noon time slot. Yeah. All
right. So obviously you're a historian, you're a history buff. Some may call it the fake news of yesterday, but I actually want to talk about that a bit in our second, in our main discussion there. But really why I wanted Matt on for that discussion is, we were joking around, Brad and I was asking AI live, who would be considered the most sort of decentralized, sovereign-minded founding fathers. It gives you the usuals like the Jeffersons, Sam Adams, Patrick Henry, speaking of Ghost. And then I said, who would those founding fathers have considered to be pussies amongst the other founding fathers? And surprisingly, it did not spit out Hamilton, although I thought it was going to. But it spit out a few others. I think it spit out George Mason. Like it spit out a few of them. But I more just used it as a kind of funny illustration of the fact that, in the current time, especially in a patriotic community like this, we talk about the founding fathers as this sort of monolith, right? And it's easy to forget that it was not that at all, right? Like there was I was going to say borderline violence, but in some cases, literally violent series of disagreements between those guys. And, you and I haven't discussed this in depth, but I would guess that at a glance, we probably lean toward different founders, or at least you like more of them than maybe other people do. And Matt had written some articles for Badlands recently, one of them on Alexander Hamilton, in fact, that I think would be interesting to discuss for me and for the audience, because I do think that we fall into some traps of just being like, I don't know, Adams didn't like this guy, he must have been a bitch, when there was probably more going on there. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts before we get to that a little bit later on.
Yeah, and sorry, my mic is my mic working, by the way? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, no, I think and I was really happy that both of my two recent pieces passed the mustard and were digitally printed on Badlands Media Substack.
Yeah.
That was cool. The first one was in reference, it was called A Defense of Alexander Hamilton. The second one is more of a defense of Abraham Lincoln. And I think, I decided to do those things in the way that I did them because I just find that there's so much contention and polarization between people who either adore to an irrational degree those two figures I just mentioned. They watch the Hamilton play on Broadway, which is like, this big hit musical for the last decade. And they love Hamilton. They've never read him, but they love him. Or inversely, they despise Hamilton. Right. And there's no shortage of narratives that paint Hamilton as this nefarious, I guess, not even Machiavellian, like a Beelzebub kind of creature, a satanic sort of figure that brought in a proto-Federal Reserve on behalf of the Rothschild Jewish banking evildoers to subvert the U.S. from within. He created the foundations of big government, which is at the heart of a lot of the abuses to our freedoms. So too did Lincoln. Both of these guys saw value in using the power of the nation state to do things, which obviously have been used for bad effects over the years. But then in my mind, it's like, does that mean that they were both evil? Are they our enemy? Or were they agents of the empire? Or does that type of power that was utilized by both of those guys at different moments in history that involves wielding the power of the sovereign nation state to execute actions in the real world, did they intend for certain moral responsibilities to be associated with those types of policy actions that they put into motion? The greenbacks by Lincoln, the earlier tariff policy, and national banking structure of Hamilton that we abrogated, that we let go of. And when we let go, and I think, and I have come to the conclusion over time that the fault is kind of on those who came after these two murdered leaders, in that we allowed our cultural atmosphere to become increasingly corrupted to the point that we forgot that we have to keep our government in check, and that every citizen has to be very active as a normal. You can't just vote every once in a while. You got to be like an active, engaged human being every second of every day. And when you do that, then the idea of government doing things economically or other is not a bad thing. It will be an instrument to defend for, by, and of the people. as Lincoln pointed out, it wouldn't be something that would be used for by an oligarchy to enslave the masses, which it has been used in our modern day. So that's why I did it. And I'm going to do a few more in that series to sort of just try to keep on fleshing out this theory I have. And I'm curious to see what people respond or how they feel about that.
Yeah, that's a great table setter. And again, we'll spend a little bit on some current narratives before we get into that a little deeper. But I love the way you laid that out, because to loop this into current times, I actually think that, when I was reading your piece on specifically Hamilton, but also a bit on Lincoln, I was reminded of a lot of the tension, intra-MAGA tension, the tension within the MAGA community, and there's so many offshoots of that, right? There's like normie, what I call normie MAGA. Then there's sort of like, there's Fox News normie MAGA, who are Bush voters who became MAGA, and, some of them saw the light, some of them just keep voting for Trump by accident, but they would just as soon vote for the next neocon. Then there's like truth community, there's Q followers, there's, libertarians who came into this world. And I think Trump is a really interesting microcosm that kind of gets to, he's kind of a current example of the tension that you're hitting on in that discussion, in that how often are we seeing in this world, like even amongst each other at Badlands? I mean, we might be disagreeing tonight, I don't know. But how often are we seeing Trump as this focal point where one day he seems like a total anti-federalist, like, burn down the system, decentralization, the sovereign man, right? Like that's kind of, one day he'll seem like that. The next day he's like, well, it's okay if we print $5 trillion, like, and that kind of thing. And I just think for the purposes of this discussion, it's not about 5th gen warfare and game theory. Like we talk about that stuff, but there's so much guesswork to it that I think it's cool to have an earnest discussion on that tension between sort of federalism and anti-federalism, centralization and decentralization. And I do agree with you. Like the reason I like the direction of that series is not because I'm reading it and agreeing with everything or being like, yeah, I totally believe all the intentions of these guys were always good and earnest. It's more to say, okay, well, have I put them in a box that maybe the establishment would like me to put them in? And similar to how is history going to remember Donald Trump, right? It kind of is going to depend on who writes it. You're probably going to have people writing about how he was this anarchical anti-federalist, and you'll probably have other people writing about how he was just Hamilton 2.0. So I kind of think it's interesting when you can have those discussions about the same guy on totally opposite sides of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's really well said. Yeah, and it's so much more nuanced than as truth often is than the popular narratives will, presume. And sure enough, when you do read a lot of the contentious arguments and debates in the early Continental Congress, even as far back as 1774, all the way up through the 1780s, what you get is a tendency, by and large, that we have good people who all really want to create a better world. They've just sacrificed so much. They've risked their lives. Jefferson, Hamilton, they're often framed as arch nemeses, oil and water, incompatible. But it's like, no, both men they both risked their lives for the sake of humanity. They achieved a success with the victory at Yorktown and the British surrender, at least nominal surrender. And then the fight is, well, what have we built? What have we created? How do we make this thing how do we flesh it out? It's been a concept, but now what do we do to make it real? And of course, humans, we're not God. We're all trying to hypotheses like, well, how we're framing hypotheses based on our, and they're very scholarly people. Like, I mean, the founding fathers, by and large, were very well read. They
were like warrior scholars, philosopher warriors. It's more and more badass the more you really dig into. I know you've dug into a lot of it, but for me, like really kind of getting back into that research, it's striking almost. You forget, like Brad was saying, George Washington, first president, scholar, philosopher, also literally riding into battle at the head of columns like that. It's a different thing we don't have in the modern age.
No, exactly. And I mean, these guys were scientists. They were carrying out recreationally scientific experiments like Ben Franklin. That's what he was doing, And
right.
Like for fun as well as for practical effects. So I mean, they had a higher sense of pleasure that only the philosophical mind that really immerses itself in a study of higher ideas, Plato and other things like that, Cicero, can really get a taste of the universal higher pleasures that are beyond, I like cake. I want a nice vacation, like things like that.
Right.
That stuff is all good. I love cake too. But I mean, at the end of that's not the, there's a domain of a realm of higher pleasure that these guys were immersed in. And so when you read the writings again and the debates that were going on, it's like there's truths on all sides. Don't get me wrong. There were also, I see a lot of evidence that there were like evil stay-behinds who in their heart of hearts would have preferred to have always remained loyal to the British Empire and acted on the surface like they were patriots in order to subvert it from within, much as we saw the case with stay-behinds after World War II was over in the NATO, Nazi Gladio operation under NATO. We saw that there were Germans acting patriotic afterwards, but they were always unreconstructed Nazis working to destroy the fabric of the social order after World War II was finished. So that was the same thing after the American Revolution. British, United Empire loyalists, some did come to Canada and created this new weird thing called Canada that you and I have discussed. But then other ones did stay behind and work to break it up from within. I think the emergence later on of the Skull and Bones of Wall Street, by and large, has this grouping to thank for it. But many of those who are in dispute, the Jeffersonian Democrats, the Hamiltonian, I mean, a lot of the Federalists were shit. But I think I've come to really respect Hamilton the more I've studied his thoughts and his works and his life. They were all looking at different aspects of the truth and trying to figure out, Jefferson was much more about the individual, the sacredness of the individual as a point of personal liberty for everybody to do what they want.
He probably would have been a Bitcoin maximalist.
I'm sure he would have been, yes. And Hamilton put more of his emphasis on the general welfare idea. Right. Does that make him like a closet crypto Marxist before there was Marx? I would say that's
is what you're saying. We're just putting G-money terminology in all this. So Jefferson's a maximalist and Hamilton's a shitcoiner is what you're saying.
Yeah, I guess what?
No, but that labeling.
That's actually funny. If you want to do it that way, you could say like he would be a Klaus Schwabian central bank digital currency guy, Hamilton, and then the Bitcoin maximalist would be the Jefferson. If you want to take it to the cartoonish extreme, which neither would be true, right? But it's a fun idea. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and even that kind of gets to the point of I think, what I've really been trying to think about. And anytime I say something like this, there's like one person who's like, you guys are not the founding fathers. When I say we, I am always using the general we. Truthers, the Badlands audience, people that are trying to figure shit out, right? We remember the founding fathers, and there's however many of them that get that kind of moniker applied to them. But the truth is, there wasn't, 23 guys kind of like figuring out how to run the country. They're the ones we remember. Maybe those were the ones with the most enduring ideas. Maybe they were the ones who stayed in the game the longest and sort of, affected change on a long enough timeline, for better or worse. But there were hundreds of thousands of people that were involved in sort of the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between of founding the nation. And the reason I think that these discussions, I know there'll be like somebody clicking onto the show who's looking for only Epstein stuff, only like what's going on in the news cycle right now. We do talk about that stuff a lot and be like, why are you guys talking about Jefferson and Hamilton? And I think it's good because lately, I shouldn't even just say this past week, this year, 2025, there has been a remarkable amount of tension within the quote unquote truth community, right? However you want to define the truth community, we all kind of know what it is when we say it. Truth seekers, people who don't follow the mainstream, largely aligned with Trump, etc., conspiracy theorists, persona non grata, all of us are that to different degrees. When I say it's a bit shocking, I guess I just didn't expect. I think a lot of us expected, all right, golden age, Trump's in. We're probably just going to be talking about positivity narratives all the time from now on. Now maybe we didn't think it was going to be that naive. But I do think we've all been a little taken aback by there's Israel, Iran, and everybody's, arguing with each other at each other's throats about it. Now there's the Epstein narrative and Trump's responses to it, and everybody's at each other's throats. And I think that it's kind of interesting to consider the current state of the truth community of America First patriots and apply that lens back to the founding. And when you kind of read about Jefferson and Hamilton and Sam Adams and John Adams, and I think it was Sam Adams I was reading about, who kind of went back and forth on his stances a lot. And history remembers these guys as like finished products, finished narrative products. Here's what Sam Adams was. And I think it's healthy for us to remember that they were not these static minds that just had like Hamilton was this guy and Jefferson was this guy. And that's kind of what the truth community finds itself doing sometimes, where they're like, hold on, didn't you say that the Epstein thing was this? It's like, well, yeah, but now let's look at what's going on in the current narrative. Let's try to apply different frameworks to it. Let's have devil's advocate debates back and forth about what could be going on here. And then there's some segments of the truth community that are like, oh, when they say trust the plan, they mean do not question anything. Do not, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, get active and engage. You don't have to do anything. And, again, I think looking back to the founding and how those guys acted, it still remains signal of maybe how we should be acting these days. We shouldn't be running away from debate. We shouldn't be running away from even chaos and confusion. We should kind of be leaning into that. That's when your ideas are the most important.
Yeah, iron sharpens iron, right? And I think that's the foundation upon which any type of, if we're going to have a democracy, it can only work if we really embrace the idea that we none of us are God. We all have hypotheses about the best way forward, and we all need to hone our hypotheses by testing them. We can't just sit in an ivory tower in a vacuum and just speak with people who only think like us, which is often the case in this sort of like multicultural mosaic of network social groups that only reinforce each other's choirs, instead of doing the human thing, which is to go out into the marketplace and throw out a provocative thought and see if it withstands other minds who have thought differently. They're not you. They've thought about things differently, and they can throw questions, and you can have a friendly, it's not a fight or flight thing. You don't have to destroy your enemy or run away from them, which is what we've been sort of told in this like woke liberal era of toxicity, where people don't believe in the power of reason and discovery. They don't believe in it because they were only told in school generally to get the right answers at the test, get the right answers, memorize the formula. Don't ask what question would have been causing the mind of a Pythagoras to discover why the Pythagorean theorem was true. Just memorize the formula, the symbols, get the effect, pass the test. It's an answer oriented conditioning process that disrupts the natural flow of a mind, which is to ask why is the natural thing that humans do. And when you have an education system wired on the question instead of just simply getting the right answer, you get a very different effect where people become more confident with their power to go into an environment that they don't control and just test out your ideas. And we saw that again with the debates through the Articles of Confederation, the Federalists, the Anti-Federalists. They saw value in that, and they were still able to love and respect each other, even though they despised each other's opposing opinions at the end of the day. And we saw evidence of all kinds of changes for good and sometimes for bad. And one wonderful irony I get is, despite the fact that people think that, and it's true that for by and large, the later Jefferson, especially when he became president, or even before becoming president, was generally on the opposite side of most things from Alexander Hamilton. He wouldn't have become president had it not been for the absolute fight of Alexander Hamilton to get Jefferson elected in 1800, because as Hamilton made the point, Jefferson's a patriot. I disagree with everything he's saying, but he doesn't want to destroy the nation, whereas Aaron Burr is a slimeball who is working actively to destroy the nation, and everything must be done to stop Aaron Burr. And so he put his full passion into getting Jefferson elected. And that's a fun irony. It's a wonderful paradox because it breaks this mold that, these guys are two opposing polarized boxes and couldn't live together. No, there was a synergy there at times of crisis that allowed for big changes to happen. But yeah, the power of debate is key today, especially, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting too. It almost reminds me of like in very reductive terms, if you've got coaches with different philosophies, you've got a super offensive minded coach or a super defensive minded coach. Like they can have totally different approaches, hate each other's approaches, not work well together, etc. But like both are trying to get wins for the team with that approach. So again, we'll dive into that a little bit in a little bit. I do want to hit some current stuff. I do want to correct you on one point. You mentioned like that we don't want to see drive our enemies, see our enemies driven before us, something like that. And
fight or flight.
Fight or flight, yeah. But I subscribe to the Conan mentality, and there is something to the great pleasures in life.
This is good, but what is best in life? The open steppe, free thoughts, falcons at your wrist, with wind in your hair. Wrong! Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the lamentation of their women.
I mean, I'm not saying Matt disagrees with that, but Conan told that there are times when they just get the narrative right. We don't need to ideate on it. We don't need to, it's to see your enemies driven before you and to hear the lamentations of their women is something that I think the founding fathers would have unilaterally agreed with. But in terms of current narrative,
for every season,
absolutely. Couple current narrative things. I'm not going to let you off the hook being Canadian or reminding everybody that you're Canadian. I like to do that, and my own Canadian just brought me a spot of coffee, so that was quite dutiful of her, and I appreciate it. So we won't go too crazy on the Canadian stuff tonight, but I actually did genuinely want an update. If you've been following the Canadian political scene, the reason I was reminded of it was, Trump in the midst of a million different deployments over the last week, announced again, I think he's hitting Canada with 35%, something like that. Tariffs, that's what he's saying. Recently, we had that back and forth where the Canadian government had been, I believe they were retroactively fining American tech companies, something like that. They were charging them retroactive tariffs for access to the market. And then when Trump threatened them with a tariff on that, they capitulated. But just generally, I know that you were projecting, for anybody who's not aware, Matt was projecting Mark Carney really being like the guy on deck for the regime in Canada. And when we say Canada in the context of this discussion, really, I'm talking about in the context of kind of a regime proxy. That seems to be how Trump talks about it. Just like we've got it in the United States, we've obviously got our regime puppets, just like you've got it in the UK and Australia, etc. But I'm wondering, as a Canadian, how you're seeing the current sort of political situation there. Both, what are the macro moves you think the Carney group is making, especially in light of Donald Trump? Where is it going in 2025? Are we still having an election up there? And then finally, what do you see as sort of the state of the Canadian public mind about their own government, or are they focused on the American government right now? Little things.
Yeah. Little tiny little questions. I can share some thoughts on that. So thus far, what I could say about Carney, and I just came back from Calgary, Alberta, where I spoke at a freedom group. There's actually a very big independence-minded movement that has grown up in Alberta over the last few months, especially since Carney was, I guess, elected, so-called. I use that. King. Yeah, by the king. He was given royal assent to sit on the in Ottawa and call himself privy, or he's a privy councillor. He's a prime minister, but his oath of office is his oath of loyalty in taking office was to keep secret all things that will be kept secret, and to do as a good servant of His Majesty King Charles ought to do. And I'm not paraphrasing it. That's literally the text. Both for Charles as a individual, but also his heirs and the institution of the crown per se, which is more than the sum total of the individuals who sit on the crown or on the throne at any given time. So since then, again, there's a lot of messy sentiments on the West Coast, where there's a very American spirit. There you go. Yeah, that's
just for context, Matt had written this a little bit ago, a couple months ago, The Deep State Empire Strikes Back. And yeah, guys, if you guys are interested in this, badlands.substack.com. All our stuff's free over there. If you want to support us, it supports the writers. But yeah, he is not exaggerating. This gets lost in the noise sometimes, but we literally had the King of England essentially anoint the leader of Canada. And I guess everybody up there just thinks it's like a joke or a pageantry thing, maybe, is kind of what I take away from it.
Yeah. Most Canadians think that it's just a pageantry thing. They they read the tabloids, much like the British, your average British subject in England has been conditioned, or I would say degraded, to become enwrapped in tabloid gossipy news, the lifestyles of the rich and famous, but mostly directed around the royals. That's been a thing that was, I think, crafted probably not coincidentally around the early 1960s, late 1950s, around the time when the National Enquirer was created in the United States as a phenomenon. I think that there was actually some deep psychological manipulation behind the crafting of both of those things to degrade the minds of a target audience. The Americans obviously don't give a shit about royalty.
Some do now, man, because you're onto something there. Because you know what, some of the most popular shows on Netflix now is The Crown and The Gilded Age. You know, just in terms of ratings, they get tens of millions of views in the U.S. now. So I think you're onto something there, where it's kind of this poisoning and a bit of a humiliation ritual going on with the royals.
I think it is too, and that's a good observation. And I have noticed, especially it's cropped in. I think the entry has taken a few different forms into the American psyche, but you have amongst a certain subsection of Christian nationalists a romanticization of the grandeur and nobility of the old monarchies pre-American Revolution, which just managed the world better because, you know, they had this formula. Daryl Cooper, who came out of Tucker Carlson, actually alluded to this several times in his viral Tucker Carlson interview, that the concept of Christ is king, that the institution of the crown is the institution of Jesus, and thus the authority of Jesus was wielded by he who wore the crown. And it was just a simpler way of managing society where the peasants were well treated. There's a romanticization of peasant culture and medievalism in the narratives that we're seeing crop up.
It's like a good dog owner. That's how they saw the elites. You know, they're nice to the dog. They feed the dog. They walk the dog. Shouldn't the dog be happy? Is
absolutely
how these people think.
Yeah, it's just if they get some, you know, if your human bipedal dogs get ideas of like freedom and liberty and want to let's say get off the plantation, well, you got to go, you know, scorched earth and murder them, of course.
A little bit of genocide, you know.
Yeah, like for the greater good, for Jesus. It's not such a big deal. But so that is coming up. I've noticed as a more normalized part of the discourse amongst conservatives, which even ends up by a corollary, ends up casting the American Revolution itself, in many cases, as a sort of Rothschild Illuminati conspiracy, which, as the story goes, you know, the royals of Europe were victims of the big bad bankers, especially the Jewish bankers that took over control of the monarchies, and they started fomenting, you know, proto-Bolshevik movements of revolution to create what became the nation state. And they did that to disrupt the beautiful, harmonious social order of the medieval age, where there was a sacred superstition that everyone just was happy being, you know, again, talking dogs made in the image of mud. And thus the American Revolution becomes seen by people who go too far uncritically down this path as being a bad thing. and then the American Revolution gave rise to the French Revolution, which was clearly
rabble rousers,
a Jacobin bloodbath. Yeah, and then of course that inspired the Russian Revolution of the Bolsheviks, which inspired, so you see how the mind can really, they play these narratives to get us to become our own worst enemy and not appreciate what type of how the American Revolution was qualitatively different from those other color revolutionary artificial Masonic operations that did so much bad and were in fact traps. So there is that. But all that to say,
this is just one note on that. I wanted to continue. One note on that is that I the reason I like having discussions with somebody history minded like you and Ghost as well is because historians are kind of the researchers, if they're not retarded, that understand the weaponization and power of narrative, right? It's not just that, yes, history is a narrative. It's that, as you're saying, the powers that be at the time that they were understood the power of narrative and crafting narrative at that time. And, that's what you're hitting on there. Like there is a both proactive and retroactive or retrospective narrative programming being done. And I think it's interesting that you comment on the Royals, because there is something there. There is something to the modern age. Maybe they've realized people are they were kind of done with that. They thought it was silly, and maybe they're trying to bring it back in a little bit of a subversive way. But continue with Carney.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, they're definitely rebranding it. And I mean, I think because that was part of what I was trying to just, I guess, so what you had with the CIA, in the CIA's case in 1951, they created the National Enquirer, and that was this guy Generoso Pope Jr., who is working with the Psychological Warfare Operations Department of the CIA under Allen Dulles, who then in 1951 came out and created, with money from Frank Costello, the National Enquirer, and the whole idea was to declare war on the powers of the reasoning faculties and the passions, the very heart of the American people, who they didn't want to be able to. They wanted a population that couldn't discern fact from fiction, and that the line between reality and fantasy would be as blurry as possible. So they would infuse real investigative reporting into this magazine, fused in with crazy stuff, which was just creative make-believe. And that slowly started dismantling the psychological faculties of the readers, who became, I mean, it's like watching a freak show. It's interesting. You pay money. I don't, but I mean, people pay money to watch freak shows, and the bearded lady and stuff. It's kind of like that. And when people start wasting their time in this type of world, their mind, it's like junk food. And with just like the body that eats junk food, it becomes incredibly fat, disjointed, unhealthy. The mind also, metaphysical junk food, also creates less of a faculty to be able to do the thing that the founding fathers were doing. And I think the same thing for the British people around the same time. You had this massive explosion of this new genre of tabloid material, but focused primarily on the lifestyles of the royals. And people began to fetishize more and more what royals were doing in their bedrooms, or in their yachts that you'll never experience as a plebe. And so there was this weird usefulness to getting people to obsess about the dirty laundry of royals, but that betrayed the idea that behind these stories was an institution that wielded real power. And I don't mean the individual per se of Queen Elizabeth, although you could say maybe she was more powerful than people realized and probably more evil. But the entire British Empire was wielded, or was built up around institutions like the Privy Council, these hereditary bodies that would manage the livery companies of the city of London. That was a city within a city, untouched by the laws of England. The king or the queen has to bow down to the Lord Mayor of the city if they go into the city. That's weird. So there's evidence of this power that is global. It is supranational. It is old. It's old power, old money that's tied to a lot of these massive estates that go back over, in some cases 1,000 years for many of the noble families of England, when the Norman invasion of basically the Northmen, the Vikings, was brought in as proxies, kind of like ISIS was used by the CIA. So too were the Northmen used to go and invade and take over England in the 11th century. And then that's
back when the terrorists were white.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they were still, Christians killing Christians was the thing, and but that's it. So these Viking, and that's part of, I think, why there's such an emphasis too on rehabilitating not just the crown through the Netflix shows you just alluded to, but also like how many shows and movies are around romanticizing
like that they were. I literally to Mrs. Bright yesterday or the day before I was talking about that and how the Viking, because we were talking about Islamic extremism and how the intel agencies had so much to do with that. And then, the narrative becomes the reality, because then you've got these sort of programmed Islamic extremist sects that then commit these acts. And then you get the true believers who become Islamic extremists. And then that becomes the face of Islam. And I kind of said, like, yeah, there hasn't been that many examples of that in recent history with white culture. But then I said, actually, you could say the Vikings were like an infamous example of a horrible, marauding, demonic, literally, culture of disgusting savages that were literally like invading island. Like people talk. It's good to point out, because for as much as we talk about ISIS and all this kind of stuff, it's just because we're so far removed from these berserkers and marauders, where they would get hopped up on psychedelics and they would invade villages and rape and kill everything there, take everything that they had. And like in the modern day, you're kind of like, oh, look, it's a redhead. They probably came from the Vikings. And it's like, yeah, not willingly, right? Like we joke about that, but it's like, oh, look at all these Irish redheads running around. It's like that. Yeah. The result of rape and marauding. And again, not all of them. Like you had Brian Boru, and you obviously had all these different groups and nuances, but I do think it's interesting to revisit Viking culture. And you're right, the romanticization of it. We're like, oh, they had like this cool pantheon of gods. You start going into any of those mythologies, which I have extensively as a fiction writer, and they are dark. Like the gods that they looked up to are human sacrifice, crows eating people's eyes out, just like violence. Their idea of heaven being killing, it sounds like hell to other people. So a lot of weirdness there.
I know. No, it's so interesting. And, you've got there's a multi-layered revival movement going on. Like Bjork is a character, a strange, psychologically disjointed young lady who is also deeply immersed in this occult esoteric Viking Norse revivalism. And she's played, with Willem Dafoe, who I'm pretty sure is a Satanist. In the Northman film.
Oh, that's a great movie. It's a creepy movie, but it's creepy.
But in a lot of these movies, and it's very entertaining and very useful to watch these things. But they have to even admit in a lot of these shows that human sacrifice was a prevalent, normal thing amongst the. And there's this one, I forget the name. There's so many that they're kind of merging in my mind, where you have this kid watching his brother being taken to a shamanistic sort of, I guess, solstice ritual, and the family's so proud of the older brother who's going to like lay down, and this shaman woman comes out, does her thing, and this little boy is so happy to see this interesting ritual. He has no idea what's going on, and everyone's so proud of this young child. He gets brutally murdered in front of everybody. As just it's like the stories we hear from the Old Testament of people gathering around Morlock, like the big temple of Moloch, right? This
Moloch,
Moloch, and people would just be so happy to have the privilege of letting their baby child burn alive in the furnace of Moloch, and that was just something you did on Sundays. So it was like that type of dehumanizing degeneracy. And making the profane become a sacred act is one of the ingredients that oligarchies require or demand of their victim population. Because if we allowed that level of degeneracy, as the Vikings, not, again, like you said, not all Vikings are created equal, but a lot of them are. If you allow that, then people can't use their minds at all. They won't be able to rationalize guided by moral principles, their conscience and reason coexisting, working together in a mature way. They won't do that. They can't do that. And they will only be able to adapt to the type of controlled systems that the feudal landlord allows for the plebes to adapt to, and will give them certain hedonistic pleasures as rewards for their good behavior of being degenerate now and again. You can rape, you could pillage, you could take your plunder, but don't try to think out. Yeah, it's just culture. Yeah. It's perfect cultural relativism, right? Just let it. Just respect the right of them to cannibalize and to eat their children, and that's just the way they are. And we'll just respect the right to be left alone and do their thing until they come and eat your kids on a psychedelic high frenzy that they're it doesn't work. It doesn't work, but that's what they expect. And why am I saying? I'm saying this because I
asked you about Canada, and we got into a great rabbit hole about Vikings eating kids, and I'm here for it. I mean, this is what we do here. I'm just, if you want to say anything about Canada, you're welcome to, but I'm happy to stay on Vikings being savages because it's interesting stuff.
Well, and the ancient order of the Druids as well is something which Queen Elizabeth, people can go on YouTube and see on YouTube 1951 ceremonies where Queen Elizabeth, a young Queen Elizabeth, after she's already been taught by her uncle how to do the Hitler salute, and that's also on Time Magazine's cover back in, anyway. But you could actually see her being initiated into the ancient order of the Druids, as was Winston Churchill. As you'll find many of the members of the high nobility of England have all been and are today still members of the Masonic Druid Order of High Initiates. You got the American Druids as well. A lot of them have the more clout. Alan Moore. I mean, there's writers for DC Comics who
he's going to come up in my solo section later.
Oh, cool. All right, Alan this is going to be a little teaser then. Yeah, but a lot of writers who have done such things as the Watchmen, other very influential stories that are so influential on shaping the zeitgeist, actually are deep immersed initiates of the Druid Order. Yeah, and I think that that's not a coincidence that many of these writers who get sanctioned and commissioned by Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hollywood studios to then get their ideas turned into high, very expensive productions with high production value. That's not a coincidence, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite things, I'm actually going to bring up Watchmen later tonight. I love that graphic novel and movie, even though some don't. But I agree with you with Alan Moore. But one of the things I'm so interested in with the narrative, with my own life as a writer, and now as this stuff, whatever this is, InfoWar, it's all stories. But you kind of mentioned that they sort of have to show you, like in the Northman, I find Alan Moore really fascinating because whatever his intentions were, he certainly understands how the real guts of the system work. And I agree with you totally that there's a reason art like that gets elevated, and it's probably not for good reasons. But I find it interesting to track with the different characters that Moore created and the ones that have these moral through lines, because sometimes I think even when these occultists or systemites are crafting narrative, they've got to put the opposing force in there. And then half the time it feels to me like we don't know the intent, right? We're never going to be inside the minds of these people. But sometimes I think the people that they don't want to become sort of, that they're not trying to glorify, become the most glorified. And, Rorschach came out of the Watchmen as really the enduring hero to most people. Where maybe Moore doesn't think he's the hero. Maybe Moore thinks the Adrian Veidt sort of situation is the hero. But it's tough to know. I did want to. I want to give the opportunity to just give a brief on what's going on in Canada. But I do think that occult thing ties into the only other current narrative that I wanted to touch on before returning to the founders.
Yeah, dude. No, I mean, I like riffing. This is good, and we're totally at some point. I'll say something about Canada. I promise people. I will.
Well, it's all downstream, right? Canada is Canada. It's not the only one, but to me, it's almost this morbid, fascinating. When you were on the show a couple weeks in a row, months ago, we talked about Canada a lot, and just as it's this very strange thing. I'm talking about kind of the story of Canada, because it's like kind of the U.S. is the way it presents itself. Mm-hmm. The way Canadian people present themselves, they're like, yeah, like we're kind of Americans, unless they don't want to be called Americans, and then they're definitely not. Then they're definitely Canadians. But there is an identity crisis, I think, in Canada, even worse than the American left-right paradigm. And I think it's actually gets to where when you're going on all these rabbit trails about the Queen and occultism and the regime and all this kind of stuff, I think that kind of helps to explain on the macro how you end up with such a strange kind of proxy nation situation like Canada that wants desperately to not be American and yet is very difficult to have a defined culture, because it seems that its culture was largely assigned to it by these top-down sort of directives, by these top-down narratives. I don't know if I'd mentioned when you were on the show, but I married a Canadian and have Canadian in-laws, and my Canadian grandmother-in-law still alive. She's still kicking. She's still with it. She's in her mid-90s. But she got very upset one time when I was kind of besmirching the Queen, when the other generations around the table were kind of laughing about it, and I was making fun of the Queen being on Canadians' money. So to your point with all this stuff, even I think for Canadians who are not thinking that this is still an active part of their story, it is. It on like this, even a subconscious level, there is a deep connection between Canada and sort of the British Empire to this day, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there really is. And I mean, I've written, for those who might want to unpeel that sort of onion and get a sense of just the simple perversion of fallacy that is Canada in its essence. I wrote a series of books where I put myself on a bit of an obsessive journey, because I'm born here. I'm like, what the hell is this thing I'm born into? Yeah. I found myself as a political activist at a certain point in 2006, being expected to push certain policies in Ottawa. And I was like, what am I engaged with? What am I even doing? And I was like, why does every bill that becomes law have to be given royal assent? Who's giving it royal assent? What is the governor? What is the governor general that gives royal assent as the legal head of state? Because that's the legal head. I thought it was the prime minister. Most Canadians do, but actually the legal head.
Did you say the royal governor?
Yeah, the governor general is the legal head of state of Canada. So it's actually not Carney. It's not Justin Trudeau. They're sort of viscounts, or viceroys, I should say. They're viceroys. But the governor general is the legal hand of the crown in the colony.
Wow, and it's like the hand of the king from Game of Thrones, huh?
Same thing. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And they have real power. There's something called the prerogative powers. This is something that King Charles, as a prince, he made a point that he wanted to expand the power of the prerogative powers that were only made public in 2008 or so for the first time. They were always secret. Somebody leaked them within, and then the crown basically said, yeah, that's our powers. That's the powers to make war. It's a huge list. It's a crazy
just those
list.
Little things, huh?
Yeah. Wow. And King Charles made a point that upon his accession to the throne, that he would expand and begin to utilize those powers. And they have been used, though people don't know it. But in the case of our sister colony, Australia, which is another part of the Commonwealth, they also have a governor general. And in the 1970s, you had a figure named Gough Whitlam, who was the prime minister, popularly elected, very, very good guy, or at least a well-intentioned guy, who decided to do the unthinkable, which was to kick out the Five Eyes when he discovered that there was this secret spying apparatus of the GCHQ and CIA operating with a similar agency in Australia itself. That's today known as the Five Eyes. Back then it was less known. Yeah. And he basically said, no, they can't be here. and he tried to kick them out. And as soon as he did, the Governor General, Philip Kerr, fired him. And literally he was called into the Governor General's office and told, you're out of a job. And that was it. No more prime minister one day or the next. Nobody talked about it anymore. So
man, it's fascinating. My wife is in chat and just said on the Governor General thing, she said, yeah, liaison from the government to the crown. But it's interesting the way she framed that, even because that's probably I would imagine that in Australia and in Canada, that's the narrative. Like if anybody up there even first of all, I'm not convinced if I asked most of the Canadians I know if they know what a Governor General is, that they would know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but certainly doesn't get a lot of play. But is that kind of the public narrative, that it's a ceremonial position or they're a liaison position, but in actuality they are the de facto ruler?
Yeah, that's sort of, well, it's so here's the thing, right? It's a systems management thing. The empires created a pretty well-oiled machine, which has a very, very complex but centrally managed culture of the civil service. It's a good shadow government built into not just the Governor General, but also because I wouldn't say that the Governor General is like an evil genius per se, nor would I say that the lieutenant governors that are sort of the analog to that role on the federal level. So on the federal level, it's the Governor General. On each of the provincial levels, where you have a premier, there's a lieutenant governor that plays the same role. And it's not the same thing as a lieutenant governor in the United States. In the U.S., it's an elected office. Here, it's an appointed thing. And the lieutenant governors, about 98% of the time, going back to 1867, when we were founded as a confederation, sort of the British Northern Confederacy that was against the Union. Every lieutenant governor also is the royal instrument, or that has to give royal assent to provincial legislation before it becomes law. They're all members of what's called the Order of the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem. About 98% of the time. That's actually up until 2005. That was 100% of the time. After 2005, they loosened it a little bit, so you don't necessarily have to be initiated into the Order of St. John of Jerusalem. For those who don't know, the Order of St. John of Jerusalem is the Order of Malta. It's the Anglican version of the Order of Malta that was created in the 1870s. Because the Order of Malta is still a Catholic, Crusader order. Right. The Order of, and before it was called the Order of Malta, or the Knights of the Sovereign Order of Malta. Before that, it had another name, and it was called the Knights Hospitaller, or the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem Hospitaller Knights. That was sort of the right-hand path to the left-hand, or no, the left-hand path to the right-hand path of the Templars. So they were both
the Red Cross.
The Templars the Templars were doing the Red Cross thing. These guys were doing the Amalfi Cross, or the Amalfi sort of symbol from the city-state of Amalfi that was very closely aligned to Venice, and that oversaw the Crusades, which again, I think this has something to do with the Norman invasion of William the Conqueror, and a little bit early, like a few decades before the Crusades were launched. I think that the Northman conquest of England that created the foundation of the vast majority of the English oligarchical families that are still in power today, most of them came in at that moment. And I think it was directly connected to that had to be done in order to create the environment for the Crusades to be launched, to create these forever wars between Christians and Islam and Judaism. I'm quite sure that's
the forever war template. I mean, it's interesting because that's been in the zeitgeist a lot recently. Israel, Iran, Israel, Palestine, etc. is obviously kind of the most ubiquitous synonymous with that. If you research deep enough into Russian history, which I went down that rabbit hole years ago, some of the little signal statements that people like Putin, Medvedev, and perhaps particularly Sergei Lavrov drop about the history of the region now known as Ukraine. It's the further back you go, whether you're talking about Templars and the Crusades, or Peter the Great and all these kinds of things, the more everything starts to look the same as today. And, when you're talking about what'd you say, the Lord Governor of Canada?
Yeah.
The
Governor General. Yeah.
So, when you mentioned that, and then in Australia, how one of these essentially fired the prime minister, and then you mentioned that there's this order, like, forget what they're even named and all the connections, right? Just for a normie, the idea that the idea you just presented, which is not an idea, it's just a fact of recent history. The Governor General has this authority in Canada and Australia, right? Sometimes it's been used, sometimes not. And they are very literally initiated into an order to, that they are then selected from. That sounds like a radical, insane conspiracy theory that you would see at the beginning of a Guy Ritchie version of the Legend of King Arthur, right?
Yeah.
But when you're talking about like, oh yeah, there's secret societies in a cave here. I'm watching some like low rent Arthurian fantasy mystical bullshit with wizards in the woods. Who gives a shit, right? Suspension of disbelief. And one of the reasons I use terms like that, cognitive dissonance, suspension of disbelief, verisimilitude is a word I use all the time on this show and beyond. Something Chris Paul uses a lot as well as a writer. This shows you why storytelling is so important to the regime, because Matt can explain to another Canadian, like, this is just public record. I'm not even going into the deep shit yet. And I bet Canadians look at you like, I mean, yeah, I can read the wiki on how that is true, but that you can see that they will not encode that as the truth and then observe reality with that in their mind, right? And, you mentioned the Commonwealth. Even the idea of Canada and Australia, I do think it's good to point out, they are really like sister proxy nations. They are very literally not independent nations, even to this day. And I mean, I'm not even claiming, the U.S. has always been, because this community wouldn't exist if we didn't know our own system had been completely infiltrated over the course of decades, etc. But when you're dealing with Canada and Australia, you really are dealing with publicly acknowledged and codified proxy states of a British Empire that still very much exists and like is codified legally, and yet nobody believes that. Australians and Canadians just walk around thinking that they're Australian or Canadian. And it's kind of like, I mean, you're something, but I wouldn't say that you're that.
I've encountered a lot. I have this conversation a lot, as you can imagine, over the years. Yeah. Very few Canadians have any inclining, and as you pointed out, they could take some of the facts. They can go to Wikipedia and do the exercise. I know some people who have done it. I've done it, where you just take a list of all the governor generals of each of throughout history. Go to the lieutenant governors of each of the provinces, make a list, and then look at each one and just check off the list. How many of them are initiated into the Order of Malta? And just take note, take it in, right? And then think about that. And then think about maybe how the leading members of the SS were also just like the leading members of the CIA. Every single director, I believe, there might be an exception, but I don't think there is. From Alan Dulles and Hillenkoetter and onward, were also initiated into the Order of Malta. Like, just take note of that. Then just take a step back, sip some iced tea, and think about what the hell the Crusades were from a new standpoint.
Exactly.
Yep. And then think about the culture and like, what is it that is being pushed in our movies and our shows that is maybe trying to rehabilitate certain narratives about what the Crusades were, the Norman invasion was, that might be intentionally glossing over certain truths we should be paying attention to that would give us better insight into how things like 9/11, people would throw around this word, the 9/11 was launched by the new neocon crusaders, the new crusaders for the forever wars against Islam. It's like they say the words, but they don't think about the weight of what that means, because it's absolutely
what are you actually saying?
Yeah, it's like, correct. Think about it, right?
This is how old this is. This wasn't this. I've talked about this as my former liberal mindset. I was a Democrat, an Obama voter, etc. And I was perfectly comfortable engaging with the surface level narrative you just presented, right? Because for me, it fit into my preconceived notion of Republicans bad, the Bushes are bad, right? It's the Bushes. But to your point, it's like, yeah, but knowing the surface is not nearly enough. Once you dig and dig and dig and dig, you're like, well, yes, it was the Bushes, and that means it was this secret order, and that means it was this order behind them, and that means, yes, the crown had to do with it, and that means, yes, there was Israeli involvement, and then you end up at the Crusades. And with the Crusades as well, that might be maybe not the first example, but maybe the first infamous example in history of what looks like a pretty obvious case of the controlled opposition dynamic, right? When you talk about the Forever Wars, Chris Paul often talks about controlled opposition. And, you know, why did they needed these two formerly peaceful empires, Islam and Christianity, to be fighting each other. They needed that. They needed the destabilization. And that was the best one they ever did, because it continues to this day. Essentially, they give it a new coat of paint every century of why we got to be... Remember, guys, you got to be killing each other. Like, if you started to forget, let's knock these buildings down. Now, can you kill each other again? Okay, all right. We're back on track. So maybe that's starting to unravel a bit for some people, which is good.
Yeah, I hope so. Because, and again, if you forget why you're killing each other, we'll help you remember it, as you said, right. Knock some buildings down, or we'll have our, you have chivalric crusader orders. I mean, of a variety of tastes and flavors. You know, there was a limited amount. There weren't infinite, but you know, you had later on the Teutonics, but you had especially the Knights Hospitaller, the Knights Templar. You had some Spanish and Portuguese orders that cropped up a little bit later, modeled on the same thing. But then you also had a Muslim order too, that were working with the Templars, called the Assassins, the Hashashins, that were psychedelic. They would drop psychedelics. They would often do hashish, but other things too. Opium was prevalent as part, not just of just an escapist pleasure or something like that. It was a sacred drug that would get them into an altered state as part of their initiatory experience before they would go and carry out an assassination of a target. And it was always going to be a murder-suicide, because you were expected to die. And it was a shame if you survived after you've killed your target. It was a mark of shame. And I think that if you did make it back to the home turf of the Aleut Castle in Syria or Egypt, where your home base was located, then you would probably be killed. But all that to say, you had a murder-suicide terrorist cult of Hashashins that had an initiatory degree of knowledge that identified their existence as pre-Islam, though they used a surface Muslim sort of veneer, but would often spend more of their time, more often than not, would target fellow Muslim leaders that were trying to initiate peace with the Christians over the kingdom of Jerusalem. And sometimes they would kill Christians, but often they would kill Muslims, and they were working with the Templars and helping the Templars understand what the symbols were that they were coming across in Solomon's mines under the Dome of the Rock, which was the Templar headquarters. And I think that the Templars did have an obsessive eschatological, that means like sort of a view that it was their divine purpose to ultimately set the foundations for the rebuilding of their idea of Solomon's temple, based on a very different perverse notion of what that meant, what that site actually meant as a center of Moloch child sacrifice, which was, even when you go to the Old Testament, there's a number of instances where it's pointed out that Solomon did, in his weaker moments, engage in sacrificing to Moloch, which does mean, I'm sorry, folks, and I think Solomon had his good times, but also couple of bad mistakes that would have meant you're killing babies. I'm sorry, you're throwing babies in the fire.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was going to say, but that's what these guys wanted to revive as far as a future New Age reset of a new type of humankind that would normalize human sacrifice, especially child sacrifice, once again. And who knew? This conversation might even dovetail the Epstein discussion in a weird nonlinear way.
This is perfect. Yeah, it's a perfect. It actually, we didn't plan it this way at all, but it kind of perfect. We mentioned Canada. We go into Vikings and mushroom trips. I mean, we've all done a mushroom trip. Most of us just don't. Most of us don't invade the Andals and the First Men after doing so. But yeah, then we end up to Epstein, which is exactly what I was going to tie it back to. And I also wanted to say too, shout out to Chad. I saw Mean Gerb, just a lurker creating an impression for the show. I keep forgetting about that, but guys, we always ask you to like and comment on the shows and stuff like that. I think John has mentioned on some shows. Rumble is trying to roll out some sort of monetization stuff that we've really never had access to. When I say we, it's not just Badlands, across Rumble. When you're on YouTube and you're seeing people getting tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of views like our shows do on Rumble, those are full-time, like, you're good. That has not been the case on Rumble. It's not Rumble's fault. They've been gate-kept, literally and legally, by the Google AdSense blockade, etc. They are trying to roll out some ad programs, and as John has said, they are trying to count things fairly. And a big part of how they're counting engagement is not just watching the show, but if you hit the thumbs up button, if you leave a comment, if you jump in chat with a username. You don't have to do it, but it does help us out. So for people who can't send in rants, who can't send in boost to Badlands or something like that, just hit a like, share the show, jump in the chat if you want to. When John asked people after his little Florida meetup, big Florida meetup, a few weeks ago to jump in the chat, we had like dozens of new people in there. And, a lot of them maybe will come in for one show, but a lot of times when you jump in there, you end up kind of sticking around because it's pretty fun in there. We like going back and forth. So I wanted to shout that out. I also want to, can I keep you for another half hour, Matt?
Yeah, I'm having fun, and I don't really have anything serious on my agenda, so it's good. Yeah, let's keep going.
We'll go toward like the 11 because it's too good. Before we get on to a little bit more of Epstein, and then maybe the topic that we were going to talk about, but this one's great too. I do want to shout out our next sponsor, which is just us. Deadwood is 4 weeks away. And Jordan Sather put together a little promo for you guys.
Coming August 14th to 17th, Badlands Media returns to Deadwood, South Dakota for the 9th stop of the Great American Restoration Tour. Come for family, friends, fun, and a f***ing good time. Hear truth bombs that hit harder than B2s on an Iran nuke site from Burning Bright, Chris Paul, CanCon, Red Pill 78, Brad Nabby, Ash, Ghost, Jordan Sather, John Harold, whoever that is, and more. Plus, Alpha might make you a sandwich. Deadwood is a gorgeous town in the middle of the Black Hills of South Dakota. If you've never been, you need to see it. Plus, you might be lucky enough to witness some terrible karaoke from your favorite Badlanders. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/events for weekend or one-day tickets. And if you can't make it in person, virtual tickets are available too. Watch from the comfort of your couch with tons of behind-the-scenes content and get access to an exclusive guard chat. That's badlandsmedia.tv/events. Be there or be there online. It'll be recorded.
There we go. Jordan putting together a nice one there. I also wanted to see if this will work. Can I play this one? This is for some folks for digital. Let me see if this works. I don't know if this video will work.
Oh, while you're doing that, can I just say one thing?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. The assassin order, just like the Knights of Hospitaller, it didn't disappear, but still exists to this day in an unbroken continuity. And if people Google Lieutenant Governor of Alberta, you'll find a lady and have a look at what she's a part of. And you might be interested to note that she is a member of a particular order called the Nizari Ismaili order under the Aga Khan. The Aga Khan being the head of the assassin order. So the Nizari Ismaili under the Aga Khan, which now is at number 5, is the claimant to the ongoing sort of tradition of the assassins that were rehabilitated by while the British Empire were overseeing India, and the assassins had to kind of go underground, and they regrouped in India in the 13th century and kind of just incubated and grew their thing and worked with the British Empire as local controllers there before they were sent back to start becoming an overseer of fifth columnist operations across Arab states and Africa.
And then eventually intel agents. It's interesting. I mean, the order of Assassins, etc. They've got their threads going all the way to modern CIA, etc. Let me just grab this other Gart promo here as Matt fills your head with the conspiracy. You're never going to get into any one of these orders, man. You keep
I don't
talking
think so.
like this.
Yeah, I thought about that. It's sad, eh?
Yeah.
I've really like sabotaged myself. Damn.
I know.
All
right, we got another one here. Let me see if this audio works.
All right.
Can't make it to Deadwood? No problem. Join us virtually for the 9th stop on the Badlands Great American Restoration Tour. Streaming live August 15th through 17th from legendary Deadwood, South Dakota. Experience GART from anywhere with our exclusive virtual live stream ticket. Your pass unlocks front row access to lively discussions and the premiere of Codex 9/11. All from the comfort of your own home. Make new friends and have your questions answered live from the group chat. Grab a ticket to join us in Deadwood. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/Deadwood and get your pass today.
Good stuff. That was put together by Chris Musgrave. So that's a digital, badlandsmedia.tv/Deadwood. For anybody who missed the announcement, Brad, our own Brad Zerbo, has been working on a 9/11 deep dive for over 3 years, consistently. You know, sometimes when you're a writer and you say you've been working on something for 3 years, it means you work on something like a madman for a month, you hate yourself for 3 months, you work on it again for a month. Like, that's what working on it for years means. But Brad has been like working on this thing 4 years, and I'm really interested to see what he dug up there. I think it's going to be one of the most comprehensive analyses of the narrative we were told about 9/11, and I think that's one of those narratives. We touched on this tonight. It is so synonymous, ubiquitous in this community, and yet when you start talking to other kind of truthers, other Badlanders about 9/11, you'll find within a couple of minutes that while you largely agree on the macro, like it is not what they told us it was, you probably have wildly divergent takes of what actually happened. So I'm interested to see what Brad's take on it is. You know, I'm not saying he gives you the definitive answer, but I think I've seen enough of it to know that there's some stuff that a lot of us think we've seen everything about 9/11, and we have not. There's a lot there. There's so many connections, and he's really trying to make this like the comprehensive, everything the establishment told us on that day and after that day, and how it does or doesn't match up with reality. So that should be really fun.
Yeah, interesting. I also kind of felt like I've seen everything that there is to see about it. And so I'm very curious to see if you can come at it from a new angle that I haven't thought before.
It should be fun. So that'll be at Deadwood, and I believe if you have a digital ticket, you will get to see that too. Well, it was in the promo, so, you know, if we don't show you it, that it was false advertising, but I think we are going to show you that. All right, let's get back into this. Okay. So we mentioned, you mentioned in our totally planned rabbit trailing, from Vikings to magic mushrooms, you know, I had written down, this is all orbiting the occult. You know, you're talking about whether it's Canada, whether it's the Crown, Viking cults, the Crusades, the Templars, the Hashashins, etc. The deep state in all its forms comes down to secret societies doing things in secret. Why they do these things in secret, you've studied a lot more. You know, I think we have ideas of why that is. This kind of, maybe there's true believers among them who really believe in this stuff. Maybe it's a sort of initiation thing. It's trust. It's leverage, blackmail. We all understand that kind of surface level stuff, right? But this Epstein narrative that's back in the news cycle is obviously back in the MAGA news, back in the national news cycle for different reasons. Seems like a narrative reversal from Trump, although, you know, that can be argued as well. But either way, Jeffrey Epstein is a name. I've called it the largest red pill ever deposited into the collective mind. I've been calling it that for a few years now. The name itself is now infamous worldwide, and what it suggests to people, even to normies, I think is the idea that elites, so-called elites, have been engaging in occult behavior, or at least trafficking and depravity, at a level that maybe a lot of normies did not believe. And so before the show, I know you mentioned, like, Epstein isn't necessarily one of your rabbit holes of choice, but you are well versed on secret societies, on the occult and everything. And I wonder what you think of the Epstein story and how sort of sensational it is in the collective mind, not just in MAGA, but even in Normieville, and just what it signifies to you. Do you think this is disclosure? Do you think it's a psyop? What does the kind of Epstein narrative mean to you, especially in light of the occult and secret societies, and, like you're mentioning, I mean, crimes against children, and the elites of today?
Yeah, I guess it could be a bit of both in some ways, because, you know, I think Epstein, and I've read Whitney Webb's 2-volume book series on Epstein, and it's useful. It's limited because it doesn't really get into the higher historical mechanisms of the occult so much. She really keeps it. Right. That's fine. She set out to do something and she did it. But it does, you know, showcase the mechanical purpose of things like Epstein, and there's much more beyond Epstein. Obviously, I think everybody watching this is very aware of that. But that deals with you know, getting your targets who you want to behave a certain way, who are high value targets. Let's say they're in politics, they have some influence, they're in you know, corporate executives, into situations of compromising activity. P. Diddy is another one. So we know, okay, that's the thing. That's part of what J. Edgar Hoover did and was done to him. It's part of the system. That's the way it works. You take pictures, you get that, but that aspect of it is probably a little bit more recent because it's an ancient practice. But it's more recent because photography, modern technologies only resulted in photography coming about in a covert way within the last century. Before that, you couldn't really take pictures or video footage covertly of people that you wanted to have a sort of Damocles hang over their head and use against them if they step out of line. So why was this still being done? I think this is a new aspect of an already existent long-term practice,
right?
Which deals with something. I mean, you know, we got people like Peter Nygaard in Canada, you know, like the Canadian version of Epstein.
There's like somebody everywhere. There's all these different versions of Epstein in the narrative over the last few years, like you said, with Diddy, Nygaard, Epstein. There's somebody in each. Even John of God is kind of that as well. Never got quite as infamous.
But he was big in Brazil. Huge high-level people in the Brazilian parliament and Latin American were implicated in his.
Don't you have the indigenous children in Canada as well? And you have some controversy about that in the last few years. You
got the Moonies, Reverend Sum Young Moon's operations with the Unification Church. That's another. I mean, part of their influence operations within Washington, D.C., which was pervasive in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and it still is. These guys they owned the Empire State Building. The Washington Times was owned by these guys, a huge global operation. And he had his little angels, these young girls who they would train to be seductive little vixens, to like do dancing performances for both to raise money, but then they would do private performances that they would then get the kids, to be the sex toys of politicians who they would take photographs of. They would give a lot of Rolex watches to politicians too. Yeah. A lot of money going around. Where was that money coming from?
Jimmy Savile, I see in the chat as well. Speaking of the Brits, man, there's like an infamous figure. To your point, it's not just the figure, right? It's about what's behind them. What's the money behind them? What's the influence behind them? Who wants those services? And the influence that goes along with those services. So yeah, there's an infamous example in the last few decades from really each of the main every nation.
Yeah, and I mean Jimmy Savile's that's a deep one, because Jimmy Savile was I mean, of course, they only allow this to go public after he dies, but sure enough, you know, now the horror stories of not the hundreds, but the thousands of victims, child victims, that this benevolent figure who was knighted by Her Majesty the Queen, he was a sir, he was a mentor of Prince Charles. He was a mentor. Literally, they would party. He would party with King Philip. Prince Philip Mountbatten. They would party together. Prince Philip Mountbatten's uncle, Lord Mountbatten, who oversaw the partitioning of India into India and Pakistan to play off Indians versus Muslims, Hindus versus Muslims forever in 1946. That same guy, the Sea Lord during the World War II, was also a prolific pedophile. Prolific everywhere he went. Ireland, boys. What do you call it? Where they have orphans or orphanages.
Oh yeah, boys home, boys.
Yeah, were used as little. I mean, it was terrible. And what he was doing in India until he got, you know, himself exploded by an IRA bomb in the 70s. But he was part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
So
Australia has an infamous example. Speaking of an island, like that I know that blew up like in the 90s in particular. Forget what that island was.
My buddy Drew, he's doing a research report on this, and he was giving me some briefing slugs that he was just sending me as he was writing them today. And he pointed out that right between Michigan and Canada, there's this island called the Mackinac Island, which the Moonies had a resort on Mackinac Island. This is where Kathy O'Brien, who recently gave an interview on Jimmy Dore. Kathy O'Brien is somebody who went through a lot of this MK Ultra, sex slave, trauma-based mind control conditioning. She's been pretty well spoken, and her recent interview, she goes through Pierre Elliott Trudeau's perverse abuses as part of this proto Epstein operation. That it was located in this Mackinac Island area, which also has some weird Mormon operations going on there too, which is strange. So he's going to be doing an article that'll be publishing on my website pretty soon, just unpacking a lot of that stuff. So, you know, there's something pretty big, obviously. And I think they fetishized the Epstein thing. So they turned it from being something which was a gateway into a bigger truthful story into a fetishistic-y thing that could almost be used as a hypnotic lever of manipulation for a big chunk of the increasingly conspiratorially minded mass citizen base of America. And that's just part for the course. And all you had to say was Epstein, and you would get a reaction on a big hive mind within the population. So I think they turned it into something that was ultimately going to be weaponized and turned into a bit of a thing that's now one of the. So for me, as you know, because I published this thing that you read on Badlands Substack of Elon Musk and the third party operation. Some people say Elon Musk and Trump are in on it together and it's all good. I don't think so. I'm more leaning on the idea that it's actually bad.
You don't think this is kayfabe. You think this is
it's a type of kayfabe, but not a good kayfabe. Like I don't think Trump necessarily likes what's going on or is part of that part of a trap. I see it as a trap, and I don't trust transhumanists like Elon. And I think that part of the Epstein narrative has been used to take a big chunk of disenchanted Trump supporters and bring them into a new thing, like the dark MAGA notion, which has a lot of Jungian sort of foundations to it, of trying to tap. I think the oligarchy wants to radicalize, and they want the conservative Christian base to get more violent than they have been so far. They've tried to. We saw it in the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, where they wanted to get. They wanted the population. There's like over 1 million people in Ottawa. It was crazy. I saw it. It was a beautiful thing, wonderful thing. But there were also bricks full of pallets, or pallets full of bricks that were presented, as there always is in these cases, as the RCMP were threatening to take away people's kids. They were taking away their gasoline to stay warm, and they were providing them a lot of bricks to throw at windows and buildings and cops because they want them to get violent, because that's the type of language that the oligarchy knows is predictable. And they didn't. People were wiser, and they operated on that higher Martin Luther King Jr. level, and they didn't fall for the traps. So the oligarchy wants that to happen. And I think part of this new Elon's narrative early on was Trump is not going to, he's part of the Epstein network, and
right,
and they're not going to let this ever happen. He's a Benjamin Netanyahu, toy puppet. So they're I think corralling as many people as they can into something more controlled that I think can be used feasibly in a more anarchistic fashion as the crisis economically deepens. That's my concern, at least. So I'm not saying that that's the truth. That's how I'm looking at it. Maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I am.
It's very interesting, and I'm going to do a little section on this, a kind of solo section in a bit, touching on that. But Trump's big statement he put out a couple of days ago obviously has a lot of people riled up. I think it's super interesting. I do put a lot of stock into the things he says, not because I think he just tells you what's going on and everything he says, but because I think it's interesting to try to parse what he's saying. It doesn't mean every single message he puts out is 5D chess, etc. But the Epstein one is loaded. I mean, and I'm not saying I have the right interpretation of it. But when you mention the word weaponization, weaponized, that I think is the most interesting claim that Trump put in that post about Epstein. Saying essentially, why are you all still focused on this? But he said it was a psyop, essentially. And he said it was, the same. For years, it's Epstein over and over again. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, crooked Hillary? He goes on and on with this kind of stuff. If there was anything in there that could have hurt the MAGA movement, why didn't they use it? So, again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later on, or I will. But I think a lot of this community who has really followed the Epstein narrative, and as you pointed out, everything kind of that it leads to, I call it a cognitive cipher. It's a gateway of understanding. If used properly by the observing mind, it's a gateway into the occult, into the world of blackmail rings, into this, this elite stuff. But a lot of people in this community that do believe that there is child trafficking among elites, that do believe that there's this occult world, etc., and that don't believe that Trump is a part of that, they are dismissing everything Trump is saying right now as kayfabe, as, he's trying to get people angry about it. Now, listen, I will engage with that stuff. I certainly keep it in my mind, because I think he has done that in the past, where he seems really mad about something, and then he switches his position. He's notorious for switching his public positions. But I also think, to Matt's point about weaponization, I don't know if John and Chris have talked about this publicly. They probably have been as well. We have to also consider that he's telling you the truth as well. And this is, I think, part of the Epstein thing where that a lot of people are not considering. I think it can be possible that a lot of the theories about the Epstein op are true, and that the narrative has been weaponized to the point that Matt is making, and interestingly, to the point that Trump is making in that post. When he, and this was my first indicator that I use when I analyze narrative is who is saying it, why do I think they're saying it? It doesn't mean I'm going to be right, but the first thing I noticed about Epstein that a lot of people in this audience were using as a positive, I was using as a negative indicator when I said, okay, so we've got CNN and the Washington Post and the New York Post and Whitney Webb and every conning influencer and the Elon tech bro contingent, like you mentioned, the futurists, the transhumanists, etc. All the culture war channels on YouTube, everyone in the world who didn't want to talk about this before is now talking about it. And I think an easy way to look at that is in the Q mindset or something, and the trust the plan mindset, which I've fallen into as well, depends on the narrative, is, this was a trap. They're trying to get everybody talking about this. But it is also possible that Trump is telling you the Epstein thing is a trap, and it may not be the trap that you think it is. And I think it's worth engaging with that. It's worth engaging with, why are they trying to loop him into it? Why are they trying to post pictures of him and Epstein constantly? Why don't they want to talk about any of the other names that Matt and I have discussed over the last few minutes? So there's many ways this could go, but I think too many people in the kind of truth community are dismissing the idea out of hand that the Epstein narrative may have been weaponized against Trump and against this base.
Yeah, it's a interesting nonlinear hypothesis to entertain. But so for me, like, it's not something I put that much attention to because, there's so much messiness around it that I try to hold on to what I can hold on to, which is the big universal lessons and principles that I that's my go-to point. And what I do know is that there is concretely an ongoing tradition of human and especially child sacrifice. We see it in the writings of Aleister Crowley, where he even tells you in his book of the law how to select the perfect child sacrifice, what age bracket is the perfect choice, ideally a pure single child of high intelligence. He goes into detail, and then he says, "Oh, I was just joking." Yeah, okay, sure. And then it just so happens that a lot of people who follow you are doing that very same thing, but it's a big joke. Don't worry, don't think about it twice. So, this is something which definitely goes back a long ways. I think that a lot of the satanic, like, black mass rituals that were very pervasive amongst the Middle Ages, before and especially after the Templars went underground, when some of their leaders were burnt at the stake in 1315 or 14. A lot of them, they went underground. Some of their assets went over to the Knights of Malta. But you had a lot of black mass operations that did involve children going missing in villages. A lot of witch covens were set up in the 16th century, 17th century in the colonies. We saw Cotton Mather dealing with one expression of that. There were certainly wrongs that were done by the witch hunts, the witch hunters. Yeah. Definitely innocent women. I'm quite sure. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of innocent women suffered. There were about 36 people who were executed for being witches. Some were men. But it's been turned in our current zeitgeist, in the current culture of narratives, as though the witches were the good guys.
Right.
They don't even deny that there were witches. They're saying there were witches.
Witch means like a good thing now. Look at the most highest grossing movie of the year, or one of them, is Wicked. Right? It's a total inversion of The Wizard of Oz, which is already a dark occult film. Yeah. But they decided it wasn't dark and occult enough, so they made the Wicked Witch the earnest good guy character, just to let everybody in modernity know that being a witch and joining a coven is a good thing. It means you're standing up to the centralized authority of the man in this day.
Well, they even had in the Wicked. I just watched it with Cynthia, and pretty entertaining movie. But I mean, they even had like a grimoire that was like the sacred text that nobody, including the wizard, knows how to read. But of course, this blessed green black, like this witch with the black hat, she knows how to read it because she's real special. And so she's able to do real magic, and everybody else has to do fakery. But they're the evil ones. She's the good guy. But they have a real grimoire, a la like hardcore black mass medieval Satanism. That's part of the story. You got it also as what I'm watching. It's gonna sound like I watch a lot of freaking trash. But
this is to understand the enemy. You got to understand enemy narrative.
Yeah. His Dark Materials. We're watching on
fascinating.
We're on season 3, and again, very useful. It's high quality trash. But high quality, like, you're identifying with the Luciferian uprising that is in the Bible, and you're being recruited. The witches are the great, noble, but very wronged women who are just pure with nature and constantly getting wronged by the bad inquisitors of the I mean, it's obviously the Catholic Church that by going by another name. And so you're identifying with Lucifer and the witches. And so they don't deny that there were witches, but it's just that the witches were the good guys in the story. And that's how they sort of, but now when I'm with my new like weird glasses that I've come to learn how to wear over the last few years, I'm revisiting a lot of these stories that I took for granted. And I'm realizing that, oh shit, Cotton Mather, I've started reading through his book, going through his fights with the witch covens, and also his fights with more fanatical Calvinists who were much more ignorant and wanted to do scorched earth. And he was like, no. Like, he was trying to rein people in because they were like, they could see that there's satanic influences. Kids are going missing. Little bodies are showing up. It's causing stupid plebeian Christians to go crazy, and they just want to like go scorched earth and just kill. And he's trying to like rein them in because that's a monster. But at the same time, he has to deal with the fact that there really are Hellfire Club witch covens as well, right? So he's walking.
Speaking of that, and this stuff is threaded throughout narrative and throughout culture. The Hellfire Club is the name of a, if you're a comic book reader, which I was growing up, it's one of the main villains groups that the X-Men fight against is the Hellfire Club. And then they're a secret club of villains that all join together, and the X-Men don't know that they've got people that are in the X-Men team that are also in the Hellfire Club, and you know, it's and they do these rituals, and it's dark magic. But this stuff is, you know, they thread it in there, and it made me think earlier. I was going to say this in the Viking discussion, but this does all loop in. You know, I grew up. I always say on the shows, you know, my parents are liberal. I grew up liberal. They're not like psycho liberals. They're just kind of normal liberals. But their liberaldom doesn't just come out of northeastness of it all. They were highly influenced, I think, by the Vietnam, you know, era. And again, we talk about controlled opposition dynamics. The Vietnam War was obviously a globalist kind of hellscape, sort of engineered thing, right? But what was the hippie movement, the counterculture movement of the 60s and 70s? A lot of it was geared all around, well, to fight against the machine, which is represented by those white Christian nationalists. That's what the narrative was. You've got to kind of go the opposite direction from that. So you had this rise in maybe at first joking around hippie, coven, witchiness, and smoke some weed with your friends and listen to, you know, revitalized Beatles music, etc. And your peace and love, man, like all that kind of stuff, right? But then you kind of dive deep into a lot of the cults that sprang up in the 60s and 70s, especially the 70s. And you're like, man, a lot of these cults seem to come out of hippie movements and hippie communes, and they were all about nature, and they were all about rejecting the machine and rejecting Christianity because they were told that that was the machine that was bringing the war to them. And again, it's the same story. So even in the modern day, you're seeing a lot of these liberals, like current brain liberals, are you know, they root for peace and love is what they think they're rooting for, but they're actually just becoming like being driven away in this canned hunt away from God, away from the idea of Christianity, and just like it's all about sex and nature and save the planet because of climate change. Like it's all the same thing. It's the same story going back to the pagans camping out in Ireland that were doing the same shit. And you know, it's dark, but on the subject of Epstein and all this kind of stuff, I know it gets maybe overused in this audience, but man, Planned Parenthood, and you see the symbolism there. We've still been doing child sacrifice. We're just not putting them in Moloch oven bakes, right? We're killing them before they're even born. So people are absolutely right to call that sacrifice. And when you look at the minds behind things like Planned Parenthoods, was it Thatcher? You know, you've got it's all connected there.
Oh, Margaret Sanger, you mean?
Margaret Sanger, yeah.
Yeah.
Not Thatcher. Yeah, that's
but
yeah, it's all the same stuff.
Absolutely. And now they're even pushing to normalize abortions after the child is born, like what, 4 or 5 days, or like, well, what's the limit, right? Like, where do you stop? But on everything you just said, I'm going to say something compositionally to blow some people's minds who are watching right now. That's going to touch on a bunch of data points you just raised in your composition, which I really appreciate how you did that. Hellfire Club, starting point. So the Hellfire Club that people generally know of because of the comic, if they know about it at all, right? This was a real deal. And throughout the 18th century, pretty much every member of the British High Command of the British Empire was a member of Dashwood's Hellfire Club. They were practicing. I mean, they were practicing Eleusinian mystery cult operations within the catacombs underneath the Medmenham Manor. That was the Dashwood estate. Dashwood. I mean, they were doing some nasty stuff. Benjamin Franklin, I actually was reading a book by Graham Lowry, because people say, oh, Ben Franklin was a tool of the Hellfire Club and all this stuff. And so you can't, I'm actually going to write something in defense of Ben Franklin soon. This book I was just reading goes through actually how Ben Franklin the evidence fully supports the thesis that Ben Franklin was working for his mentor Cotton Mather, who deployed him to carry out counterintelligence in the 1720s. And the case that I've seen by Graham Lowry is thorough, that Ben Franklin did carry out counterintelligence on behalf of the Patriots in the 1720s. John Winthrop Jr., who was calling out Ben Franklin's older brother, John Franklin, who had a printing press in Philadelphia. And John Franklin was a hardcore he was recruited to the Hellfire Club. And so he had a Hellfire Club coven that he was overseeing in that part. And he was called out by John Winthrop Jr. before, when Winthrop Jr. was like 90 years old and came out of like palliative care to denounce Franklin's older brother. So Franklin was in a position to get some serious intelligence, but again, his mentor was Cotton Mather, the guy that led the fight against the witch covens earlier. So
that's fascinating.
Super fascinating stuff.
Joe McCarthy is another one that people are starting to revisit and go, okay. Go ahead though. I don't want to go down there.
So here's two things. There's where it's going to get interesting. So in 1781 or 1780, the Hellfire Club is exposed for doing some very nasty stuff, including, very nasty stuff goes public. And they have to shut down that operation in the brand that it had been known as. So it stops existing. However, Dashwood's nephew, whose name is Joseph Adelson, out of Oxford, sets up something called the Phoenix Society in 1781 to carry on the program of the Hellfire Club. And the Phoenix Society, very secretive entity, but enough has been known, and they've even published some sanitized versions of their own proceedings. They give it that name basically on the idea that we're going to burn down the old and then rebuild anew. That's the old Phoenixing idea, and the Phoenix has a beautiful idea to it, but the Rosicrucians and these occultists, they have a very nefarious notion of destroy to rebuild, right? What's called the break apart to reassemble, which J.K. Rowling, by the way, has 2 tattoos on her wrist for those who've been paying attention.
Speaking of witches. Yeah.
Speaking of witches, the creator of Harry Potter.
It's a great story, but man, I've got a young boy, and I'm like, man, I kind of was thinking about when he's older, it'd be fun to read Harry Potter with him. But nowadays, I'm like, I'm not sure.
Yeah, man, stick with the Hobbit.
It's everywhere. Yeah, exactly. See, Tolkien's a real one, and the more based you get, the more you're like, he was a real one. And the more based you get, you look at all these other like pop culture phenomenons, and you're like, no, these are dark.
C.S. Lewis is good too. His space trilogy is fun.
That's true. I don't like the stories, but I appreciate the man.
Yeah. Now, okay, so where is it going with this? Right. So the Phoenix Society is set up in 1781 out of Oxford. Now,
also an X-Man, chat pointed out.
Now, so the way this controlled dialectic works, and I just finished reading this book. I literally just finished this. It's a great book by Frances Yates called The Rosicrucian Enlightenment. It's a really useful book because she's a lying Druid priestess herself from Oxford and the Warburg Institute, who's publishing this thing in the 60s. And she's basically trying to create a narrative to make the entire Renaissance appear as though it's the effect of magical thinking by Rosicrucians. She's just putting everybody into the same Rosicrucian box, saying that everything good and everything bad came out of the Rosicrucians, but mostly good. But she admits that the Rosicrucians, which basically are followers of the writings of Paracelsus, Albertus Magnus, these alchemists, these hermeticists, a lot of Kabbalists, but this grouping that went public in 1614, that they are the same thing as the Jesuits. She makes the point that the Jesuits and the Rosicrucians are two sides of the exact same working, and she's right. In my assessment, she's absolutely correct. Now, if you read the X-Men, which we both have, and I think most people have at least, most people listening to this now have at least watched the movies, but you probably read the comic books.
It's enough in pop culture. I think people kind of get the gist, right? A school for gifted youngsters, Xavier in a manor, and the X-Men train in the basement underground.
in an invisible college, which is the name given by the Rosicrucians Royal Society when they did a phoenixing operation. And so this guy, the current occult idea of the phoenixing notion was developed by this guy Michael Meyer, an early Rosicrucian of the 1618 period, that oversaw. He was an advisor to Friedrich V, who was led to believe that he was sort of a divine avatar of Apollo, who was going to usher in some sort of new beautiful age. And so this guy was actually induced to go and declare himself Holy Roman Emperor, even though he was a Protestant. He was the head of the Protestant League. And, surprise, surprise, the actual Catholic Holy Roman Emperor wasn't happy with that. Now, the Catholic Holy Roman Emperor was then being run by Jesuits. So the Jesuits had already infiltrated and turned Christianity into this rigid perversion of itself.
Yeah.
And that's part of what they do is they make Christianity become the most absurd, rigid, constricting thing that would
authoritarian Puritans.
Very ignorant. And then with that suffocation, it would create a higher tendency for humans to go Luciferian, to have a Luciferian rebellion. And so, and then you control that. So you control both aspects together, right? And that's how they get these. Now, the phoenixing idea of burn it down to recreate was done in the form of the 30 Years' War. These Rosicrucians literally organized useful idiot leaders of Europe, especially Friedrich V and his wife, Elizabeth Stuart, the daughter of James I, to go and launch into do something very predictable that would result in the 30 Years' War that became a millions of Christians killed Christians, Protestants killed Catholics for over 30 years until 1648. And so he has this it wasn't really a geopolitical war in that sense. It was this other thing. Now, okay, keep in mind, Jesuits and Rosicrucians, two sides of the same working. Yeah. Francis Xavier, the name Francis Xavier, who's overseeing this invisible college, and that's what the Rosicrucians call themselves, the invisible college.
The good guy, just for anybody who's not a nerd like us.
The good guy, but he's also kind of very rigid, very rules-based, very much embodies the sort of Jesuit left hand to Albertus Magnus, who was the name of Magneto, his childhood friend and possible love interest when they were younger. They went through common trauma bonding when they were both young, and they both dealt with their trauma of
they played a little grab ass.
And they both have these muggles, these ignorant humans who hate them, and they both reacted to their trauma in different ways, where Magneto wants to just kill the muggles, and Professor Xavier is just like in a constant way wants to reform them, and one of his key students is Phoenix, right? Jean Grey, who's periodically like losing control. She's got some like deep-seated trauma, and when that comes out to the surface,
she has an altar. She has an altar that manifests. I gotta reread the 90s, the X-Men runs in the 80s and 90s because she manifests an altar that is demonic and extraordinarily powerful, and becomes a cross between a messianic and a demonic figure, essentially.
Yes, exactly. Who the sacred and the profane are united in this traumatized character. Now, in the case of Harry Potter, very similar thing with Dumbledore and Voldemort, and they both have a childhood common trauma bond. They both have like this weird, one has the Sethian sort of school that he was part of, and that's Dumbledore, and then Voldemort, and Dumbledore is the Francis Xavier type. Now, Francis Xavier, keep in mind, that was a handler of Ignatius Loyola in 1534 at the University of Paris when the Jesuits were being created. Xavier is one of the 5-person committee that was handling Ignatius Loyola and traveled with him and managed him throughout now inversely. So Francis Xavier is literally playing in as a prototype of this thing. And Albertus Magnus, that was literally a Dominican alchemist who's the father of the Rosicrucians of the 14th century, who inspired Paracelsus and all of the leading Hermetic Neoplatonists that perverted the Golden Renaissance dynamic and turned it into a decadent, thing with like little baby penises everywhere, and the Renaissance aesthetic got a little decadent and crazy at a certain point, and it had a lot to do with these Neoplatonic Hermeticist followers of Albertus Magnus that inspired the Rosicrucians, that provided again the feminine extreme ritual to the masculine rigid sort of willpower thing of the Jesuits, and so they played this thing together, and you get that again with the Harry Potter stories, and the fact that again J.K. Rowling has Baphomet's tattoo, the breaking apart in coagulum, when Baphomet is pointing to the sun and the moon in that Eliphas Levi etching. That's exactly what she has
above, so below. They're trying to these are all the traps they set, right? It's not just a controlled opposition dynamic. It's layers of controlled oppo dynamic. J.K. Rowling, they're trying to rebrand as based because she's anti-trans, when, as Matt points out, she's got a Baphomet tattoo, which is the symbol of sort of transgender, as above, so below, do what thou wilt sort of thing. One little etymology nerd moment. You mentioned, I did not know this, Francis Xavier. He was the handler, you said, of Ignatius of Loyola.
Yeah.
So the etymology there would be fire for the first word. Ignatius is Latin for fire or fiery. And then Loyola would be loyalty. And in the comic books, who does Xavier handle? Jean Grey, who then is manifest as the Phoenix, reborn in fire, who is his most loyal student.
Right.
Along with Scott Summers. So, man, it's you look at all, and it's like, you could say, oh, it's clever, it's a writer being clever, but man, there is so much symbolism steeped into this stuff that it's impossible to see it as accidental.
Absolutely. Now keep in mind, Hellfire Club becomes Society of the Phoenix. Yeah. Now, so the Order of the Phoenix is also one of, I think it's the fourth or the fifth book in the Harry Potter series as well. So they're weaving that into that story. Yeah. Now,
good call.
And the fact that in Vietnam, what was the thing that really, really characterized Vietnam was Operation Phoenix. Operation Phoenix was what, like, that was a massive torture murder operation being run by Edward Lansdale, Michael Aquino, who's the second
creepy
eyebrows man, yeah, who like that guy coiffed his eyebrows like nobody's business. He saw himself as the reincarnation of Aleister Crowley, and the prophet of the age of Set. That's why he created the Temple of Set. He also had a huge amount of influence in the military. He had like above top secret clearance in the military. He was a big overseer to the revolution in military affairs with General Stubblebean in the early 80s. His Mind Wars document with Paul Valéry is hugely influential. That became standard policy for asymmetrical like mind wars and the types of technologies that would anyway.
Yeah,
that guy is
Xavier's a telepath, by the way.
Yeah.
So another
as well, right? They're working on remote viewing, clairvoyance, and their thesis is that children will be the best at being remote viewers, but anybody can do it, and it helps if you have been massively traumatized and are schizophrenic. If you can be brought into schizophrenia, powers can be opened up in your mind to astral project and to see what the enemy is doing. And so they would actually, in the course of the 70s, overseen by these people. John Alexander, Colonel John Alexander, was another Operation Phoenix operative of Vietnam who went on to oversee this thing. Still is a factor until the day he died recently. These guys were doing trauma-based mind control on children to try to bring out special mental powers. And this is what, like you said, 40,000 people died. Mostly innocent victims died in Vietnam under Operation Phoenix. It was an initiation ritual because there's not many opportunities in life to kill with no repercussions that many people, and especially children, as there was in Vietnam, or those types of instances like there have been in Afghanistan or Iraq in more recent years. So that's part of what they do, is they create these initiatory, like, it's people want to get a sense of this. Look at Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now. Like that's essentially the archetype of what was being done. Now that, and as feeding into what you were observing, like that was what created this horrific thing, is what was being fed back to young people coming of age in the 60s, being told this is what Christianity is. This is what the nation state is.
Marauding, crusading, power over power type of thing. Exactly. And I obviously was not 60s, 70s, but I had a reaction. I think we saw a milder version of that. I've commented on this recently with the forever war in the Middle East under the Bush regime. As a young liberal, I couldn't help but notice, while the narrative publicly was not steeped in religious, imagery, same with Vietnam, to your point, it was impossible to miss for a young liberal that most of the people who were blindly endorsing the violence were Christian, American kind of white Christians. Now, obviously, these days, I'm leaning more and more in that direction, and Christianity, etc. All this stuff I rejected when I was young, and went down those kind of like, I'm gonna go try out Buddhism and atheism and like the trees and all that, right? Like all that shit, kind of hippie. And there, don't get me wrong, there's some good stuff with like being raised by earnest hippies who aren't, trying to open their third eye. That's not what my parents are trying to do. They were like, hey, let's go camping. Let's appreciate the world. Let's kind of like get in touch with nature, things like that. I think all of that stuff is good. But, to your point, that's also Christian. And it's been so divorced and separated in the public mind from Christianity. Most young people today see it as like, you go to a church, you go to a house of authority, you do what the man tells you, and then you cheer for forever wars in foreign lands. Obviously, Christians know that that's not the case, but that's the story of Christianity that's been weaponized against it. Yeah. And the counterculture to that is like, oh, peace and love and the animals and nature. But there's a dark thread under that hippie sort of stuff. Besides the occult, it's a rejection and a shame of humanity itself that you start to feel when you're kind of indoctrinated into that belief system. You really start to see human beings as just another animal, just operating on base instincts, not good or bad, all this kind of moral relativism that really can take root in that kind of world-based thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, we see traces of this. I get disturbed sometimes speaking to people who are on, like, they're on my side. We all hate the Great Reset. We're all trying to make the world a better place. But there's so many people who are falling into, they're drinking the Kool-Aid once again, just like they did right after 9/11.
Yeah.
And people were, went reflexively into full hog patriotism to the point that they started supporting something that resulted in the murder of millions of civilians that had nothing to do, and the destruction of nations that had nothing to do with 9/11. Iraq, Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11, and yet we allowed and gave our consent to, we took freedom fries. We did that. And now I'm seeing a similar kind of rationalization since October 7th, that people have fallen sort of reflexively into that same kind of archetypical pattern now, where we have to do everything possible against the big bad Iranians who want to destroy our freedoms.
Right.
The Chinese, the Chi-Coms, as Alex Jones calls them, they're just like anti-human, anti-freedom.
The Russians are the new Nazis.
Enemies. The Russians are Nazis, and it's like people are just falling into the same Pete Hegseth, the guy tattooed the Templar Kingdom symbol on his chest and is given speeches about his devotion to restoring Solomon's temple, and he wrote a book on the need to sort of rally Christianity around a new global crusade against Islam and Chinese communism. It's like, this is the type of people who are having influence over the psyche of a big chunk of patriots, and it really disturbs me that we're not learning our lessons, and this could get ugly faster than people realize.
I will say that I think that that's true. I'd also say that I think a lot. It's strange. I had said many times recently that June was a weird month for me as a somebody who's been supporting kind of the Trump movement, MAGA, InfoWar, Truth Community, all that stuff for almost a decade now. But who is a former liberal, to sort of see a lot of that whiplash like same story, just a rerun. Like, let's, I have my theories of what Trump was doing with Iran. I actually do give him a lot more credit than a lot of people. I think that he knows what he's doing. I think last time you were on the show, I'm quite infamous for discussing the concept of a sovereign alliance. Mileage varies on how literal that is. I certainly take it more literally than most, where I do think that there is more active coordination between leaders like Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Xi Jinping than other people believe. And I actually saw the Iranian situation as a gravitational proof of concept of that, because we got sort of a narrative disarmament where Israel was forced to turn its planes around. We're told nobody's killed, but we're all just kind of agreeing that Iran's no longer a nuclear threat, even while the allied powers, and especially in Europe, are crying from the rooftops that they still are. And Trump is just saying, nope, narrative is over. They're not a threat anymore. Let's move forward. And I think it's strangely mirroring the stance of Russia and China, where they're talking about, civilian nuclear energy program. So my whole point there is that I think the public narrative for Trump, to your point about the regrettable portions of MAGA and of American conservatism that fell hook, line, and sinker into get 'em about Iran, I actually think that we underestimated how much of that remains. So I would agree with that point of yours. I would also say that I think it bolsters the idea that Trump has had to navigate the narrative battle space in a more careful manner than we give credit for at times. Yeah. And on that one example, I would just say, if Trump knows more than we did that a good chunk of his audience is not going to be on board with just this public nuclear deal situation with Iran, given all the programming, that he had to navigate this with a strongman sort of rhetoric. And I think he's been doing the same thing with Russia. Like, this week we're told by Lindsey Graham he's going to come out all fire and brimstone against Putin. I firmly believe no war or conflict is going to happen between the US and Russia. I think both Trump and Putin understand this fully, but I do think Trump is going to have this strongman rhetoric. And unfortunately, I think it's because he is still navigating a lot of the programming that has been set into that sort of Christian nationalist Zionist era of the American public.
It's a good point you're making, and it's unfortunate and sad. No, but I think you're making it's a good hypothesis. I wish that, I guess it's the wishing thing, right? Yeah. I wish that people were better, so that this type of thing wouldn't be necessary. And then at the other side,
clipping that somebody's clipping just that out of context so we can use it. I wish people were better, so we didn't have to be having this conversation. But you're absolutely right. I want you to finish. But you're absolutely right on that. Yeah. And that's why I'm saying I think Trump and them are navigating a difficult psychological battle space that is regrettable that it is that way.
If that's the case, yeah. And I think that Trump would be underestimating himself too, because we could see how quickly he has earned the trust of such a big strong amount of his base that when he went to North Korea last in his first term, that was like the enemy of America, the most anti-American state behind Russia was North Korea, and yet, and he said he spoke so harshly against the North Koreans, and then
they're best friends,
best friends, right? Like total bromance with Kim Jong-un. They did, they ate chicken wings together, and it was great. And it was transformative. Just the psychological, all of the years of conditioning about what is this evil North Korea was just destroyed in a split second when people just saw what it was. And the power that Trump has to influence and to improve the mindset of his base is so powerful that I think if this is actually what's going on, I think he's underestimating or not using that power to the degree that I think he could in the case of Iran, which if you just look even footage of Iranian, a day in the life of Tehran or the subways, and I've watched a lot of this footage, it's transformative. Just show people the pictures, just show people the videos of like half the women are walking around with no headscarves. Everyone's like, on their phones going shopping. It looks like a day in New York. It's not like this restrictive, scary, mullah run dystopic hellscape
That's why we got to get them, Matt, because they're in your head. See, they're in your head already. You're not understanding. They've got the hijabs. They're hiding them. That's why we got to bomb them good so that they understand. We'll give them what for if they ever get all rascally and riled up again.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. No, and I was gonna say earlier too that when we talk about MAGA, this is why I've started to split that, and I say normie MAGA, truth community. Like there are these different groups, and one of the things that's great about the Badlands audience, we are obviously biased, but we all came here organically, including all of you watching the show. If you kind of sift your way down into, or up, depending on your perspective, into what Badlands is doing, we're all disagreeing with each other all the time, as we said early in the show about the founders, all in this chat. But you go to like a GART, for example, you could sit down and have this conversation with most people in the Badlands audience. They're like, yep, totally. I see what you're talking about. Totally don't like that either. Meanwhile, my phone all week has been getting blown up by normie MAGA friends and family that are going, what's Trump doing? Blah, like, what about this? And, it does sort of, it makes you at once wish Trump didn't have to operate in this battle space while also understanding that this is kind of the battle space he's operating in. However, I also think that this is part of what Chris really hammers home a lot. John hammers this home a lot. If we want to give Trump credit, then I really believe that the sifting may be a major point. If you want to go to the ultimate, like white hat, psyops, they have good intentions, etc., then what would be going on here? Well, as Steve Bannon's been talking about quite regularly, mileage varies on him, I know, but he was heavily involved in crafting the narrative of the first Trump administration. And his rhetoric lately has been closely mirroring a lot of Badlands rhetoric, which is, you need to make your voices heard, even if you trust Donald Trump, right? Because I agree with you, Matt, that Trump can set narratives and does have that power. But you got to wonder sometimes, are they in a position where they don't want to be doing that, right? Like, are they in a position where they're saying, we keep telling you we're trying to return power back to you, the people, and you keep fucking waiting for us to do everything for you, and we get you riled up about the Middle East and you want to drop bombs on them again. So are we looking at a little bit of a sifting that way, where people need to be a little bit more engaged, as you said early in the show, a little more active, a little more willing to not just go rah-rah, team politics, that kind of thing?
Good points. I accept your points.
Which means you idiot. Well, I've kept you for a long time tonight. I had, I want to, if I can get you for one more, I'll leave it to you of where you want to go with this. But we actually talked a bit about the founders at the beginning. That was originally going to be the show. I actually think this turned out awesome. We did a lot of stuff on the occult, on the secret societies, etc. To tie this back in, my dog is trying to break mine. What are you doing, buddy? What's your deal? Come on. To loop this back into the founders as your final question here. We've kind of mentioned how, and I'm sure you know this better than most, when you start looking into the histories there, you realize how much we kind of paper over and then it gets reinterpreted. Everything we talked about tonight is kind of, it all ended up being related, and we didn't plan any of it. And we mostly talked about the enemy regime, right? Secret societies, from the controlled opposition, forever wars, from the occult, from the Crusades to Iran in the current day. Let's just, I want you to leave us off with, let's go on the founders side of that equation, the good side of the equation. It's been my belief now, based on very little research, just a feeling I've started to develop in the current battle space, that the founders of this nation knew a lot more about this stuff than maybe we think they did, and give them credit for. And I guess another way I would phrase that is, when we're taught about the American Revolution, we're taught that it was about taxation, it was about representation, it was, this new fledgling would-be nation standing up against the regime, the British Empire, right? And sure, all of that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But is it also true that these very learned scholars, as you've talked about, these extremely brave and sort of asymmetric thinkers among the founders, knew who they were dealing with, and they knew that it wasn't just the British Empire, blah, blah, blah. They knew about some of this stuff. They knew what was behind the curtain. And they knew that there were these power structures that were trying to not only dominate the world, but dominate their kind of new world over on this side. Do you think that they knew more about this stuff? This isn't something we're just discovering now in the truth community.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, they're all conspiracy theorists. That's been the norm for anybody effective throughout history, has had to believe in conspiracies because they were also part of conspiracies. Good guys conspire too, but you have to be aware of the nature of the enemy, and it's a very sophisticated enemy. And we should be, based on what I was saying about Ben Franklin's infiltration of the Hellfire Club, the awareness of these occult agencies that were like organizing covens, Witches of Eastwick, that's another useful one. Jack Nicholson, who I think is also a Satanist, was actually playing the role of the devil, overseeing a coven of 3 witches, and Susan Sarandon being one of them. Anyway, Cher being another useful movie. But yeah, they were very aware of this. Ben Franklin was himself working to expose Anton Mesmer, and I think that that's also an important gateway into the thinking and strategic thinking at that of a lot of the founding, like the best of the founding fathers. Not everybody was on that level, of course. Ben Franklin was a genius, once in a lifetime type of character, or even once in a century. However, he was working in counterintelligence into his later years in the 1780s, where he went to France with other scientists, statesmen who had a really good grasp of both what natural law was. There wasn't like Klaus Schwabian scientists of the Rockefeller-funded science of our modern age. These were like real natural philosophers who were making discoveries of God's mind, i.e., principles of the universe, right, and then applying them to new technologies that would allow us to have to. Yeah,
those things used to not be separated, to your point.
Yeah, they were just part, and that's why Ben Franklin was also like a musician, and he was making instruments like the glass harmonica that Mozart performed music to, and it's glorious stuff. And these guys were, they saw this all as all different sides of the fulfillment of the ideals of St. Augustine, and that human beings made in the living image of a creator required certain political fights to be carried out to create laws that would allow for the actualization of that idea from idea into reality. That requires cultural improvements, scientific, artistic, political improvements. So they were all engaged in this. And that's why when he went to France, he was working with Antoine Lavoisier, the father of modern chemistry, on a committee with another astronomer named Jean-Sylvain Bailly, who was the leading astronomer of France, and the mayor of Paris, who was the head president of the Assemblée Nationale, who was trying to replicate the success of the American Revolution in France. But they were exposing the Freemasonic Rosicrucian networks then being led by the figure of Anton Mesmer, the father of modern hypnotism, but a lot more than that too. He was a black magician.
Is that where the word mesmerized comes from?
Yeah. And
wow, awesome.
he was working with Cagliostro and Saint Germain, these occult practitioners who were in the middle of infiltrating the revolution and turning it into a phoenixing operation that would turn itself into a giant bloodbath that would then result in a vacuum of leadership when everybody died on all sides. The good guys, the bad guys, everybody got their heads cut off, which was the design. And as a result, the vacuum could only be filled then by a typical proto-fascist, as Napoleon was, who saw himself kind of like a neo-sun king, a new emperor, to unify the world under a restoration of the occult mystery schools, which his brother was in charge of doing as the Grand Master of French Grand Orient Masonry. So it's like these guys were all. This is what Ben Franklin was directly exposing when he proved that Anton Mesmer was a hoaxer, was creating all sorts of. He was a magician. He was an illusionist. he did do practical hypnotism, but a lot of other things he was using was to misdirect the senses and get people to think that he had special supernatural powers of channeling and other things, of levitation, that gave him influence into the courts as an advisor to many people who were otherwise going to be, who were undermined. And the same thing to be said, going ahead a century into Russia, and you had Dmitry Mendeleev, who is the father of modern, the founder of the periodic table of chemistry. He was also the guy who was in charge of a committee that exposed the black magicians and seance figures around this guy, Holm, who was a leading theosophist and handler of Blavatsky, who had become the advisor of Alexander II in 1878. And he was doing, again, levitations, all the stuff, channeling. Spiritualism was spreading all over Russia, too.
All the X-Men powers.
All the X-Men powers, exactly. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And he was exposed by these real scientists who, because they understood what their minds did when it discovered the laws of the universe, they were able to see where the fallacies, the fallacious constructs were much more clearly than other people could, and were politically engaged in fighting to bring this thing down. Now, the thing about why I bring this up is that Mendeleev was also the president of the Committee of the Protective Tariff of Russia. So he came to the United States, to Philadelphia in 1876 during the Centennial Exhibition that celebrated 100 years of America. And he studied how the American school was able to transform the USA from an undeveloped, agrarian state where there was no industry into an industrial powerhouse with a population that had multiplied something like 20-fold in a matter of a century, that outpaced the productive powers of Great Britain and Germany. How could that be done? And he studied the system of the protective tariff of Alexander Hamilton and other things. And he studied it, and then he brought it back with the delegation of Russia back to Russia, where he oversaw the application of the nationalist system that was the American system of Lincoln. And he did that to great effect, that caused the building of the Trans-Siberian Railway, these industrial hubs that allowed for the transformation of serfs who had just recently been freed under Alexander II, who freed the serfs in 1860, right before Lincoln did the Emancipation Proclamation. 25 million serfs, that's a lot of people to put to work who don't have skills, who have not been allowed to develop their minds. Huge challenge, similar challenge faced by the Americans when the slaves were freed.
An alliance they've been trying to stop coming together for literal centuries.
Man.
That was a big rabbit hole for me that really got me activated writing. And, that's where I created the name and everything and started writing. It was just going further down. You start rolling with some Dagestanis and jiu-jitsu, and then all of a sudden you're like, man, the Maidan coup, huh? All right. And then you end up on Trans-Siberian Railways, and man, have we always been best friends, secret best friends that they're trying to stop? And that's how I would sum it up. We are, this is you can use all these historical analogs, Matt, but what's really going on is the US and Russia have always been super secret best friends, and they've been trying to keep us apart this whole time because they fear what the power of US-Russia friendship could unleash. And that's not even a joke, by the way. It is supported by all of Matt's facts and histories.
Yes.
And the founding fathers knew about this, which loops it back around.
That loops it back. Yeah, now it's lawful. we just tied a bow on it. That was good. Yes. This is fun, man. This is really good.
Yeah, this is great. And I want the record to show, too, lest I face any besmirchery, that it's not just my fault that the show goes long. It's your fault, too. It was a great discussion. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Matt, certainly want to have you back on. We will, every time, most likely come up with a rubric and a plan of attack, completely get off course, and end up having a way better discussion than we were going to have. So if you guys enjoyed this episode of the X-Men, man, we managed to. I got to reread all the X-Men now. And you know what? I can still read that stuff while knowing maybe what's going on behind the curtain and still enjoy it in a different kind of way. But what do you got going on lately? What do you want to point the people to? this week, or what you're working on, etc.?
Yeah, I'm just thinking I didn't expect that question because I got so many moving wheels going on at the same time. So I'm trying. What's the most strategic thing? I just started a new project called Pluralia Dialogos. So I'd like people, if they can, to put that on their agenda every second Sunday at 11 a.m. New York time. I just did one this morning. It's a live stream with various experts, just talking about diagnosing the arsonists behind world problems and looking at solutions, with a focus on building U.S.-Russian friendship. That's the primary intention.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's a special project of Banco Intesa, so it's one of the bigger Italian banks that have some people in there who realize that nuclear war is not good for business, and they sponsored this sub project of Pluralia, which is just a fantastic platform. So people could go to that website, check it out.
What's the website?
Pluralia.com is the name of their official website. It's pluraliadialogos.com is the one I manage. And if people sign up to my Substack, they can get notified about those things, as well as the weekly seminars that I host for the Rise and Tide Foundation. So that's matthewehret.substack.com. Sign up
I'll
for
put that link in here. By the way, guys, I've said this before. This holds for badlands.substack.com. It holds for matthewehret.substack.com. Myself, burningbright.substack.com. There's a lot of ways you can support what we do. Obviously, sharing our work. You don't have to send money to us, etc. Helps us. It really does help. The engagement helps. Hit the thumbs up button, please. But I do this every once in a while. Substack, in an era defined by censorship that we've all dealt with, deplatforming, debanking, demonetization, all this kind of stuff that we deal with, Substack really has been great. I have never had a problem with them. They take some of the lowest fees out of subscriptions of any platform I've seen. I appreciate what Rumble does. They give us the ability to do these shows. Rumble has a lot of overhead, so they're running an expensive operation. So your rants and everything that come through really help us out. They help us a lot. This is how these shows are funded when we don't have sponsors, etc. But our Substacks, if you want to follow any of us, individually, Substack is one of the best ways to do that, because you're going to see the writing. If you want to sign up for paid subscriptions, etc., for Matt, for me, for Badlands, it's a great way to support what people do. And I would just say that that's one of those platforms that has really, they don't just brand themselves like, oh, we're pro free speech. They really have lived it, from what I've been able to tell. So
absolutely.
Great way to support the people you like.
Yeah,
so
that's cool. Yeah, and I'll say one last thing too. I got some books, so I put a little link into the comment section. But the Revenge of the Mystery Cults book series, that's something that I published as a trilogy together, volume 1 to 3 in December. And anybody who wants to dig more into this weird stuff and really make sense of it, that trilogy would be something I would suggest as my shameless bit of self promotion there.
Awesome, man. And Matt will be in Deadwood, South Dakota, right?
Yes.
So in 4 weeks, on my birthday, Matt will be joining us, and I'm sure you'll probably have books with you there.
Probably. Yes.
I may even have some books with me, but they're not going to be InfoWar books. They're going to be fiction.
That's ready to go? You've got them published?
I got the rights back to one of my series. So within 2 weeks, we're going to be launching that. And we'll see how it goes. Working on the other stuff. Disentangling publishing rights, it turns out, is way more complicated than I thought it was going to be, even when the other party agrees to give you the rights back, because there are third parties and fourth parties involved. So it's been very fun, but I do have one series back in my possession, so we'll be reintroducing that, and we'll see how it goes. It'll be an InfoWar break for people, more about some high-flying martial arts stuff.
I need more fiction in my life too. I get too much into the nonfiction world, and my mind needs to breathe a little bit. So maybe we could do a trade when I get to Deadwood.
Awesome. Okay, all right, man. I will see you in Deadwood, and you got to come back on, of course. So the next few weeks, Matt's going to be on the 10:30 p.m. slot with Ghost as well for Breaking History, as G is taking a little break. But otherwise, catch him on Breaking History. Follow his Substack. Thanks a lot for joining, Matt. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, bye.
All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Matt Ehret. Yeah, I had this whole plan where we were going to talk about the Founding Fathers. We ended up bookending that. That was a great example of why kids like us didn't ever do homework. Because when you can bullshit to that degree, it all ends up coming together, right? I don't know if Matt didn't do his homework. I didn't. But I was kind of a bad kid. But, it is what... That will shock everybody, I'm sure. So, yeah, we ended up talking about the occult, Vikings doing mushrooms, the X-Men, Harry Potter, looping it back into the Founding Fathers, Secret Society. I think that was cool. And I think that's one of those things where I don't think you could have planned it. I don't think I will sit down and be like, you know what we should really loop in is the Order of the Phoenix with the Hellfire Club, with Epstein Island, and Russia and the US being super friends. But I think we managed it. I'm going to do a brief little section here. A little bright brief. I'll experiment. Some of you guys like when I do some solo stuff. Some of you guys are like, what the fuck is going on? But we're going to do a little there's a couple things on my mind that I wanted to talk about. And I don't want to monopolize a show where this is not going to be as relevant. But just some comments on the Epstein situation. Talked about it tonight from a different angle. Obviously, it's been the major narrative of the last week and change. I think it's really interesting. I'm going to get to your rants as well, guys. So thanks a lot for supporting. I do, just for anybody who isn't aware, when you guys send rants into the narrative, I make sure that the team splits those with whoever my guest is that week, right? So you're supporting both of us, whoever my guest ends up being, when you guys do that. I just thought it's the right way to do things because I built this show as a rotation type of thing. Usually I'm talking to a Badlander. So, keep it in the family sort of thing. The Epstein narrative. We don't know what's actually going on here, right? We don't know why Trump is saying the things he does. We all recognize that we can't talk for years and years and years about Trump speaking to multiple audiences and fifth gen warfare and Trump telling you that he does that and then just take whatever he says at face value. I also think it's good to have this, get served a bit of humble pie, all of us, myself included, and admit at least that it's possible that elements of what he is saying do need to be taken seriously. And I use the term that I wrote about several years ago. I didn't invent this term, but I kind of repurposed it for the InfoWar. Bicameral thinking. That's been a drinking game, a Burning Bright drinking game for quite a while. And what I mean by that is not being able to consider two ideas. It's being able to hold contradictory ideas in your mind at the same time. The way I think of it is putting your ideas, putting a thought path on rails. You've got thought path A that's going down a certain rail. You've got thought path B, thought path C. That's if you want to go tricameral. There's overlap between these rails. But if you can do this, if you can train yourself to do this, you will be able to pick up sort of things. Chris uses the same terminology as me in terms of what maps onto reality. He's been saying that for a long time in his writing and his commentary. I use the same sort of refrain. I've also referred to this concept as cognitive constellations. Maybe not quite as catchy. I don't say these things to be catchy. These are frameworks I've built to organize my mind so that I can function in a normal, you know what I mean? Not in a normal way, but, in the way I function. I have to build frameworks. And this constellation idea is such that you build three different constellations, right? Let's say the Epstein narrative, and you start picking out things that map onto each, little nodes that you can put in each constellation. Some of them cross over with each other. Sometimes the constellations start to merge. Sometimes they don't. And when you do that, with enough time, you're probably going to be able to let a constellation go, let a rail go, let a thought path go, right? Like if you hold the, what if Trump is deep state? Build a constellation around it. What would map onto that? What would start to happen if Trump was deep state and this was a giant rug pull, etc.? Then you build the one. What if it's a white hat operation? What if there's a third possibility that's way more mundane and he's just kind of he's a populist and, you know, there's not this fifth gen warfare going on. Obviously, the white hat, fifth gen warfare, info war mapping is much more, that has way more nodes and data points than the other mappings will, which is why I tend to dismiss those. So let's kind of, I don't know if any of that made sense, but let's try to apply that to what's going on with Epstein. Let's just look at Trump's statement here and maybe just try to read it in ways that maybe we wouldn't normally be predisposed to read this. So this is fairly long, but I'm just going to read the whole thing. What's going on with my boys and in some cases gals? They're all going after Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's doing a fantastic job. We're on one team, MAGA, and I don't like what's happening. We have a perfect administration, the talk of the world, and selfish people are trying to hurt it, all over a guy who never dies, Jeffrey Epstein. For years, it's Epstein over and over again. Why are we giving publicity to files written by Obama, Crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan, and the losers and criminals of the Biden administration who conned the world with the Russia hoax, 51 intelligence agents, the laptop from hell, and more? They created the Epstein files just like they created the fake Hillary Clinton Christopher Steele dossier that they used on me, and now my so-called friends are playing right into their hands. Why didn't these radical left lunatics release the Epstein files? If there was anything in there that could have hurt the MAGA movement, why didn't they use it? They haven't even given up on the JFK or Martin Luther King files. No matter how much success we've had, securing the border, deporting criminals, fixing the economy, energy dominance, a safer world where Iran will not have nuclear weapons, it's never enough for some people. We're about to achieve more in 6 months than any other administration has achieved in over 100 years. And we have so much more to do. We're saving our country and making America great again, which will continue to be our complete priority. The left is imploding. Kash Patel and the FBI must be focused on investigating voter fraud, political corruption, Act Blue, the rigged and stolen election of 2020, and arresting thugs and criminals instead of spending month after month looking at nothing but the same old radical left-inspired documents on Jeffrey Epstein. Let Pam Bondi do her job. She's great. The 2020 election was rigged and stolen. They tried to do the same in 2024. That's what she's looking into as AG and much more. 1 year ago, our country was dead. Now it's the hottest country anywhere in the world. Let's keep it that way. Let's not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. Thank you for your attention to this matter. You gotta love this. Chris Paul has started using this just in his own vernacular, which I appreciate. Let's play some shoots and ladders. Let's go tricameral with this. There's not only 3 ways to think about this. These are just some macro frameworks I kind of set up in my head. Okay. Scenario number 1. I think this is how most people in the truth community, Q followers, InfoWar, took this. Scenario number 1, trap set, bait taken, full control, or full informational control, right? You say full control, let's give some leeway there. Your mileage can vary. This reading of the situation and the statement by Trump would suggest Trump knows everything that's going on with Epstein. More importantly, that everything we in this community have talked about Epstein for years, going back to the Q drops, going back to Pizzagate, etc., is true. By that I mean there was this stuff going on the island. It is related to blackmail rings, elite satanic rings. It does involve elites, not just in the United States, but world leaders, right? Or heads of state, etc. And that what Trump is doing here is amplifying a narrative, setting a trap, playing the opposite game to draw enemy fire. And under that framing, it's worked, right? You can build that constellation, you can build that rail, and it largely maps, it largely works. The mainstream media is all in on Jeffrey Epstein right now. The YouTube culture war sphere is all in on Jeffrey Epstein. The Con Inc. Doom Brigade, all in. Elon and the tech transhumanist contingent, all in, right? And MAGA's all in on the Jeffrey Epstein sort of thing. And again, I'm saying the Epstein narrative, what it all leads to. So could this be bait? Is Trump drawing the enemy in? I certainly think it could be. I don't think it's silly to say that. And I understand what John is saying, and I think it's important to keep in mind where John's been saying, well, Trump hasn't really been the one amplifying these narratives. I would say that that's only partly true. It is true that Trump does not usually bring up Epstein, but it is also true that he leaned into it when it's advantageous to him to do so. 2015, infamously at CPAC. Yes, he was responding to something in the news cycle, but he brought it up. He brought it up. So he not only brought up Epstein, but he directly implicated Bill Clinton in whatever was going on there, right? So seems to be a bit of a contradiction there, but that's one scenario. Scenario 2 that I put here is kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum. It's the one most people in this community, myself included at times, don't like playing. Total inversion, poison pills, and recalibration. That's what I named that rail. So what would that mean? That would mean you have to at least play with the idea of reading this otherwise very Trumpy and bombastic statement literally. And at least considering the idea that when Trump tells you Epstein is an enemy narrative, he might not be lying or sort of setting traps in the way that we assume he is. And just to, I think one of the things, I understand negative comments and stuff in our chats and things like that, and even that you guys all deal with on social media, they can seem amplified, right? They stand out to you more. Even suggesting this reading of what Trump is saying here it makes you an apostate in the truth community right now. You're not even allowed to talk about this. And I'll just go on record. It's not my reading of the situation. But we have to consider it. Why has the enemy, even before the last week, been willing to entertain the Jeffrey Epstein psyop narrative, rather? That's a question everybody has to ask themselves in an earnest manner. And what I mean by that is, even though everybody is all in on the Epstein narrative right now, all over the info war, all over the media space, it's not the only time they've been talking about this. There are Netflix documentaries about Epstein. The reason I bring up Netflix is it's the most viewed platform in the world. Like, I follow all this entertainment and media industrial complex crap. The number of people who watch this stuff is staggering, right? So it's a culture signal of what stories are important in American culture. And these documentaries that I think are largely psyops have dominated since 2019. They come in and out, but they certainly dominated in the aftermath there. The word Epstein is this mass cognitive cipher. It's a symbol that immediately means something to everybody. And everybody in this audience has seen for years, everyone from CNN to the totally based and red-pilled, except not at all, New York Post pictures of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. We get the Daily Mail today, right? I saw this going out. Maxwell's ready to reveal the truth of the client list, says insiders. Why are Republicans blocking her? Right? So the first scenario we laid out is 5D chess. Trump is trying to trap people who don't want this stuff to come out. The other scenario is that the Epstein op, and by that I mean the narrative, is meant to conflate Donald Trump with this type of activity. Both things can be true, okay? So that's where we're going to get into scenario 3. But scenario 1 and 2, you got to play the opposite game in your own mind. Trump knows the truth about Epstein. He's trying to amplify the narrative. He's playing the opposite game. Narrative whiplash, right? Trap set, bait taken. And this is all going to be revealed, client list, etc. he's maybe trying to provoke the audience sifting. Scenario number 2 is that, codified in law, however you want to take that, we know Epstein was guilty of crimes. We know that they involved underage trafficking, underage women, etc. But as John has been saying recently, we don't have evidence codified in the public narrative about some of the deepest and darkest theories in this community about Epstein specifically. And I think it's important to recognize that, because everything Matt said tonight when we talked about Nygaard, we talked about Diddy, we talked about all these figures, John of God, all these figures, Jimmy Savile. There are these ciphers into this dark occult path, but we don't know that stuff about Epstein. We have made a lot of connections based on the temple, this Masonic imagery, and the fact that he's been, convicted of these crimes, etc. But not like human sacrifice and all that kind of stuff, even though a lot of us think that stuff was going on. So is it possible that the enemy, they've obviously been trying to get Trump for a decade on everything they can get him. And I think it's interesting that Trump talks about the Russia hoax in the same context of the Epstein narrative, which brings me to scenario 3. This is my preferred reading of things. Could be completely wrong. My note on this one was cognitive cipher to truth weaponized. So I think what might be going on here is that both things are true, which is a big cop-out, but that's why you got to keep everything in your head at once. It's possible that the theories that we have about Epstein and this ring are largely true, and that Trump and team know this. And to Trump's point, that the enemy has weaponized this narrative. And he says that in that statement. I mean, he doesn't use that terminology specifically, but he says it's the same people who conned the world with the Russia hoax, the 51 intel agents, the laptop from hell, and more. They created the Epstein files, just like they created the fake Hillary Clinton, Christopher Steele dossier. So it's possible that the Epstein ring and the narrative is real, and that Trump knows that the extra theories that his audience has of it don't completely match reality. And I think John has been onto something that we have to at least consider when Kash Patel goes on Joe Rogan and basically talks around it and says he acknowledges the difficulty of the mass psychological battle space that they are navigating. Because he says, paraphrasing, a lot of people have a lot of emotion tied into the story. And even if Epstein was a creeper and all that, do they know that there's no such thing as the files in the way that we've all thought there were, right? Like a list. Give me the names. Give me the list of names. It's like, well, you know who's going to be on the list of names? Donald Trump. Not because he was a client of Jeffrey Epstein, but because he was a target of Jeffrey Epstein. So what's the list going to do? If you think about it, let's just take this literally. There's an Epstein list, right? When we're talking about that, we're talking about a list that Epstein had. His black book. Who's on the list? First of all, we already know who was on the flight logs. That's public knowledge. But let's say there's some other list. The black book was a list of targets from what we understand. That's the theory of what that black book would be. Trump's going to be in there. So if and when the MAGA people demanding the list get the list and Trump is in there, are you going to suddenly believe that Trump was a client of Epstein and is part of this satanic cabal and it's all been a rug pull the whole time? I would venture to guess most will not. Now, the Con Inc. Doom Brigade will, and I would guess that that's what they're waiting for. This audience would probably go, okay, yeah, it was a target list. This doesn't mean anything. Well, guess what? That means it doesn't mean anything on the alternative either. It means that Bill Clinton's name being in the list doesn't mean anything either. It means Bill Gates being on the list doesn't mean anything either. Now, I'm not absolving these people. I think these people are guilty of crimes, etc. Maybe crimes against children. I'm saying that the list, the Epstein file, the list is nothing. It doesn't mean anything. So we can't learn anything from it, but what can happen with a list like that? It can be weaponized because all that you're going to see is narratives of Donald Trump in Epstein's black book. That, boom, there you go. That's all they want, right? We would all know what that means. Now, I see people saying videos, right? If there's files, if there's videos, totally agree with that. That's why I don't hold any of these scenarios as being what is definitely going on. Is it possible that there's all these video files that have been suppressed of elites, involved in crimes against children? Yeah, absolutely it's possible. It's absolutely possible. It's possible that the DOJ covered that stuff up, right? So there's so many rabbit holes here. And I would just say, as a final bit of signal on the Epstein topic, it's also possible that we are watching the slow unwind of a psyop. And I think it's really interesting that in the last week, Trump has he's not just tried to block the Epstein narrative, from going any further, even though he's amplified it. He's trying to get people back onto the Spygate Russia collusion hoax. Brennan and Comey investigation, etc., right? Well, this could be a scenario where we have our cake and eat it too. It's possible that the current people around the DOJ are telling you the truth and they don't have the files and there's nothing to see here, etc., because they don't have it. It's also possible that we're watching the unwind of the weaponization of the Department of Justice, the narrative rather. We already know the DOJ was weaponized against Donald Trump since 2015. Is part of the public narrative here going to circle all the way back around to Epstein? Is he saying more than we think when he's talking about 51 intelligence agents, etc., and the Epstein files? Is he saying that the Epstein files are fake and they're a pure psyop? Or is he saying that the same people who fabricated all this other evidence against him also corrupted and weaponized the Epstein files? That's what could be going on here. And if that gets unearthed, that's a domino that comes after the initial domino to fall, which I would say would be indictments related to the Russia collusion spying on Trump's campaign. That does not sound like a sexy narrative to a lot of people here because it's so done over, right? We all understand this. But if you think of it as the start of the actual, on the deep state's end, that was the start of the actual insurrection against Donald Trump, right? The Russiagate hoax, the spying on the campaign. If that was the first actual and it went all through, is Trump giving us a roadmap? Epstein, he says, the losers and criminals of the Biden, they conned the world with Russia hoax. That was the first one, right? That was the start. Then he goes to 51 intelligence agents. Came later. Laptop from hell. They created the Epstein files. So he might not be telling us the Epstein files are fake and a psyop. He might be saying this is all the same thing and the Epstein files are over here, or the Epstein narrative is over here, but it starts with Russia. Just some ideas there. But, we've talked this to death in terms of not just Epstein, but this community. I don't like using that terminology even anymore. You guys have seen there are some Q people who have tried to brand us anti-Q and all that kind of stuff, anti-plan, which is ridiculous. Longtime Badlanders understand that that's ridiculous. And, these are the kind of discussions that we should be having with each other and in our own minds. You don't have to be a paranoid schizo to start mapping rails in your mind, laying rails out that contradict each other. Because it's gonna make it, as G-Money would say, you can't get rug pulled if you're not standing on the rug. I don't take that to mean don't get involved with this stuff. don't get cognitively involved in this stuff. That's the opposite of what the InfoWar is supposed to be. It means don't attach yourself to a specific narrative or outcome that you don't know. Build alternatives in your mind. Analyze what Trump's saying literally. Analyze it playing the opposite game, right? Then start observing. Let's see where the chips fall. So it can be frustrating. But the last kind of little thing I wanted to do here, I told Brad has to end Brad has to end the studio portion of this stream. And I was like, I'm not going to go 4 hours tonight. I don't know, man. Maybe we will. I want to loop this. Ironically, Matt brought up Alan Moore and the Watchmen tonight. And before he did, I was going to bring that up. Because I think this has been on my mind lately with the Epstein stuff, with Israel, Iran, etc., with some of the shit that we've been taking at Badlands and beyond. You guys too. This sort of new church going on in segments of the truth community of like, if you don't trust the plan hard enough, you're not in this for the right reasons, etc. You're not doing it right. I wholly reject that. Part of why I've been so interested in the founding fathers lately is because the more you research them, the more you realize that they were doing this at that time, right? Like they were having these discussions, they were going back and forth. You can probably find clips from me a year ago where I was on the total opposite end of some of the shit I ended up talking about this past year, right? That's how it fucking works. That's how cognition works. That's what we're all trying to do. So I've been thinking about this, and whether or not this is the intention of Trump and Patriots, Chris Paul has had, and John talks about this a lot too. Chris Paul's had some banger commentary lately about the direct path that we all have to learn to take. You can be a plan truster and believe that there is one, while also understanding that you got to take ownership of your mind as well, right? And the way Chris frames this and the way John frames it by calling it the devolution sandwich, I really like, because it's a way to keep both in mind. It's a way to keep in mind that there's a Patriot plan. It's okay to have different interpretations of what the plan is, while it's also important to understand that you're responsible for your own mind and we're responsible for the future of the nation. Because as Chris would say, I'm just looking something up here. As Chris would say, at a certain point, the string on any plan runs out, right? Even if you're the most ardent plan truster in the world, you can rationally understand that at some point in the future, the plan as it was laid out runs out, it runs its strings out, the string gets played out, right? It doesn't mean everything goes to shit after that. There's supposed to be a handoff going on, right? And I think a lot of Q people, a lot of plan people, myself included in the past, have envisioned this as like Trump is returning power to the people. That means he's going to get in there, he's going to dismantle the deep state, he's going to give the country back. There's going to be a big ceremony, right? I know not everybody believes in it that literally, but generally, a lot of us thought that kind of stuff, right? Like deep state gets rolled up, we have the country back now. That's not the way it's going to play out. And that's not dooming. I think it's good that it's not going to play out that way. And I really do think, whatever the truth is with the Epstein narrative, this is part of what Trump is doing, is he is forcing that feedback loop that we talk about a lot at Badlands, that, John and Chris talk about a lot. He is forcing that feedback loop with the American people. And, I'm sure you guys have seen this elsewhere. There's a lot of good Q commentary out there. There's a lot of good plan commentary. There's people who hate that stuff, who love that stuff. But there is a drop, 542, whether you are a plan person or not. I think that this is a first principles sort of statement that is inarguable. So we got drop 542. What's it say? We're not talking about the context here, right? I don't care about the context for the purposes of this discussion. Fight, fight, fight. Demand public disclosure. Be loud. Be heard. This is just the beginning. And talked about 2018, right? I don't know what the deltas are. I don't know what the match is. I don't know what the timestamps are. Maybe there's all kinds of shit, right? Maybe I'm a fucking idiot because I don't know all that stuff. It's also possible that we can engage with first principles ideas on their merits, and instead of trying to tie ourselves into knots, we can just act like real adult Americans and look at the words and the ideas presented right there. Be loud, be heard, demand accountability. If you believe that Epstein truth or any truth is being kept from you, whether that's for nefarious reasons or as part of some larger plan, good plan, you do not owe anybody the outsourcing of your sovereignty. In fact, even if you do believe there's this big Patriot plan and that power is returning back to the people, it is worth ruminating on the idea that they want you and need you to demand that accountability, right? It can be true that Con Inc. is doing the same fucking thing, and that they want the truth community to do it too, because it gives them the public permission to do so. It's also possible that, as Trump said in that post, the Epstein thing is a trap, it's a psyop, it's been weaponized, we should stop talking about it, right? But you don't owe anybody these things. You don't owe Trump that, who talks in circles on purpose, and he talks on opposite sides. Chris uses the term drafting, from racing terminology. I totally agree with that. This could map onto that. Maybe he drafted off the Epstein narrative. Maybe he's drafting off of the DOJ thing right now. There's a lot of ways this could go. And in a somewhat strange little thing here, I don't want to lose you guys, but I want to play a little clip from the Watchmen movie. It's one of my favorite clips in moviedom, in cinema. One of my favorite books. It's a graphic novel, Alan Moore. To set this clip up, the heroes have just finished having this mass revelation that the man who coordinated the psyop to get the United States and Russia on the brink of nuclear war in the context of this Cold War fiction story is their old friend, the smartest man in the world, Ozymandias. They're superheroes, and Ozymandias was the smartest man in the world, a hero. And it turns out that he has orchestrated an actual nuclear explosion between the US and Russia. And the reason he's done it is because once the nuke goes off, the public mandate for peace will be overwhelming. Bipartisan public mandate. He fries one city. He gets the public mandate for peace deals. The peace deals happen. And Ozymandias, Andrew Veidt, gets his utopia. So that's kind of the moral dilemma at the heart of the Watchmen. He's the smartest man in the world. The ends justify the means. He destroys New York or whatever it is. He gets world peace. And we're meant to believe that he's run the scenarios of disclosure. So that's the key there. The last scene of the movie is about Ozymandias saying, nobody can know about what happened here, because if they do, there won't be world peace. We've run all the scenarios, right? Kind of sounds like modern AI game theory, all this kind of stuff. So obviously, he is seen by most people as the villain, and rightfully so. He's very Machiavellian. What's interesting in the final scene is that Dr. Manhattan, who's sort of the Superman of the Watchmen universe, we are told, in the context of the narrative, has limitless power. His mind can travel backward and forward in time. He can analyze all possibilities at once. Once he has a known or an actual, he can map every which way it could go. He's essentially a fictional version of a quantum computer that we're constantly fear-mongered about nowadays. So Dr. Manhattan can see the future and can see all ends. And when Andrew Veidt asks him, am I wrong about what I said? Dr. Manhattan says no. And then we get the moral center of the movie, as somebody in chat, New Case, says, Rorschach is the best character in the movie, hands down. Totally. It's to lay out what is the moral argument going on in this scene? And I think it has a lot of parallels to what's going on this year in the truth community. And I think it's worth kind of just seeing how it hits you. I'm not saying we're going to get a real nuke going off. You guys know that I don't believe that. Narratively, though, I think we're looking at some precipice-y type stuff. So how do we deal with these moral arguments?
Justice. Everyone's gonna know what you've done.
Will they? By exposing me, you would sacrifice the peace so many died for today.
Peace based on a lie.
But peace, nonetheless.
He's right. Exposing Adrian would only doom the world to nuclear destruction again.
No. We can't do this.
On Mars, you taught me the value of life. If we hope to preserve it here, we must remain silent.
Keep your own secrets.
Don't even think about it.
Rorschach!
Wait.
Never compromise. Not even in the face of Armageddon. That's always been the difference between us, Daniel.
I've made myself feel every day. See every innocent face I've murdered to save humanity. You understand, don't you?
Without condoning or condemning. I understand.
Out of my way. People have to be told.
You know I can't let you do that.
Suddenly you discover humanity. Convenient. If you'd cared from the start, none of this would have happened.
I can change almost anything. But I can't change human nature.
Of course you must protect Bright's new utopia. What's one more body amongst foundations? What are you waiting for? Do it. Do it!
All right. Sorry to be a downer, guys. It's one of the great works of American fiction. I hope some of the context kind of comes through. It doesn't all have to come through in terms of the details of the plot, but just the argument there, even out of context. You've got Adrian Veidt saying, if he tells the people what we did to get world peace, we won't have world peace. And you've got Dr. Manhattan, who we're told has preternatural abilities and cognition, who agrees. He says that the statement is sound, just from the, in the context of a fictional world. That's the power of fiction. And Rorschach is, as I saw in chat, a moral absolutist. Rorschach is a smart guy, and he knows that what Adrian Veidt is saying and Dr. Manhattan is confirming is true, which means when Rorschach is leaving the base to expose the psyop, the false flag, It's kind of funny. It's a good false flag in Watchmen where it creates world peace, but it kills a lot of people. When Rorschach is leaving, his intention is to expose that, and he knows that him exposing that will make world peace impossible. And yet, while both sides can be true, they know what's going to happen on an actual level, I would argue, and most who come away from Watchmen would argue, that Rorschach is the right character. The right character. He's a moral absolutist. And the reason I bring this up in the context of Epstein and Trump psyops and the Q drops and the plan to save the world and rug pulls and all the rest of it, we're all going to continue to try to figure out what's going on here, who's doing what, analyzing the narratives, prepping yourself for what could come, what's not going to come. There's a lot of value in doing that. We can divorce ourselves from emotional reaction to things that we're seeing on TV that are largely fake, right? And I think we've all taken an active role, or more of us have tried to, of engaging in the world in a real manner. And some of that, ironically, is digital, it's narrative, it's building these communities, it's trying to get involved, it's trying to raise kids better. But Rorschach is my anchoring point as just a cipher, okay? Chris Paul, you might call a Rorschach type character. John does this when it comes to election fraud. Isn't it funny that amidst the psyop or the narrative deployment that's pissing a lot of people in the truth community off, Trump is coming all the way back to the 2020 election that a lot of people demonized us in the truth community for talking about and called us doomers, etc. John's a moral absolutist. Chris is a moral absolutist. I'm a moral absolutist. That doesn't mean we don't have tons of disagreements about this stuff, and I can rationalize what's going on. And no, I don't think Trump and the Patriots and the White Hats are going to blow up New York City to get world peace, right? But I have been arguing for years in my writing that my interpretation of the scare event is White Hats leading us to a narrative version of the ending of the Watchmen, where they will cultivate the mandate for world peace. You don't have to like that, though, right? And the reason Rorschach can be an anchoring point for you, in my opinion, is that it's a clean, it's a godly, and it's a self-reinforcing way to live. Instead of trying to be Ozymandias and figuring out what's the perfect cognitive pathway to chart in a war defined by the fact that to most of our satisfaction, we're never going to know what was real and what was fake and what was somewhere in between, even if we have our leanings. Any conversation you have in this community exposes that, right? So what do we anchor around? Morality. What is right and what is wrong? And now when it comes to Epstein and all this kind of stuff, when it comes to Iran, you can believe that Donald Trump and Patriots are forwarding a white hat plan. You can also believe that they want pushback from the American people to get the public mandate to move the story in the direction they want to go, which is something that Chris Paul has been talking about for years. John's been talking about it in the context of the devolution sandwich. There's a lot of people who use that terminology, but all they do is observe the plan and say everything's under control. Every day, 7 days a week, every night. Do you think that was the plan? Do you think the plan was to say that it's part of the plan over and over and over and over and over again? I don't think so. And, what do we do about it? That's up to each individual. But I think that whether you believe there's a Patriot plan or not, you can still question everything you're looking at. That includes Donald Trump. And often you will see that when his own base pushes back on him, he will move, he will pivot. So both can be true. There can be plans being forwarded by people in positions that have far more information asymmetry than we do, or over us. And also true that the only thing you can do is maintain a moral focus. What do you believe in? Do you believe it's okay to lie to the American people to forward a white hat plan because their metrics show them that it will have a better overall outcome? You do not have, you can understand, as Dr. Manhattan says in that clip, without condemning or condoning, I understand. I understand Patriot psyops without condemning them, as some do, and without condoning them, as others do. But that doesn't mean I have to operate in that battle space. And I think that it's just food for thought. Not the most original thought out there, but you're in charge of your mind, you're in charge of your heart and soul, and you're in charge of your interpretation of morality. And if you don't like being lied to, no matter who's doing the lying or why they're doing the lying, or they're just lying to you right now so that they can stop lying to you next month, you don't have to like that, even if you believe that that's what's going on. And I would guess that the more of us that publicly do not like that, the less it's going to be happening. As I said on a recent episode, I believe, unless I wrote this, I can't remember. I think it was on an episode with Ash a few weeks ago. The collective mind is the battle space the Patriots are operating in, okay? You are the collective battle space Patriots are operating in. You are the power Patriots are trying to project. They are not in charge of you. You are in charge of them. And if you can't call Donald Trump and give him an order, because obviously that's not how it works, you can be one piece and one node in moving the collective mind, meaning the battle space, in the direction that you want it to go in. The way Chris put this recently in a fantastic rant is blowing a hole in the enemy defenses, going forward and allowing Trump to bring everyone behind us. It's a great rant. You guys should go to his podcast, imyourmoderator.substack.com. Fantastic distillation of what I'm just saying in a different way. That moral center, he's talking about cognition, etc., getting ahead of these things. But there is a moral center that you've got to sometimes reorient yourself around. And, sometimes I don't think the point is to constantly excuse anything Patriots do because it must be part of the plan. It might be part of the plan. Part of the plan might be getting pissed off and demanding accountability. And isn't it something that the Q drops say, demand accountability, be loud, be heard, right? What do you think that means? Only when the deep state's in there? Only when our boy Blue is fumbling around as president? Or every fucking hour of every fucking day? You're an American. Act like it. Stop waiting for permission. Forward the ideas you want to forward. Stop listening to people calling you a doomer, etc. Just forward first principles. Try to figure out what's going on in the info war to the best of your ability, but anchor yourself on those first principles and morality. And I think you'll get less frustrated at these things, even when they can be kind of frustrated. Just for the record, the Epstein stuff doesn't bother me. I find this stuff fun. I find narrative analysis fun. The InfoWars fun to me. It's really engaging. I like building those frameworks. I think there is a plan. I really do. I just don't know where it's leading. And I don't pretend to know where it's leading. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to build frameworks just like the rest of you are. But do I believe we should be lied to if we are being lied to as part of a plan? No. I understand. I mean, I'm the Sovereign Alliance guy. I believe Putin and Trump are kayfabing with each other en route to a fake version of World War III along with Xi Jinping. And I think that's going to visit real, good, positive, actual effects onto the world. That doesn't mean I have to like the lying, but I can understand it. Both of those things can be true. And I think people find themselves trapped on either side of that. You can either be moral or you can be intellectual, strategic rather. You can be both, I think. You can understand the battle space while still, maintaining your own sense of morality in the process. So that's my little rant here. I am going to go through your rants before I get out of here in the stream that was not going to be 4 hours, but is going to be 4 hours. So sorry, Brad. Tom Terrific, $25 for the cause. By the way, guys, please hit the thumbs up button. I saw there's a bunch of people probably watching from the Rumble homepage being like, what the hell is this guy talking about? You just admitted he didn't know what's going on? Why would we even watch? I don't know. I don't know why you guys would watch, but you did. So, joke's on you. Tom Terrific, $25 for the cause. Indie Boy, Burning Bright, just here for the thumbs up and to find out if you have any sourdough stories you'd like to share. See you in a month in Deadwood. Mrs. Bright is becoming a sourdough extremist. And pray for me, because once they get on that sourdough stuff, it's crazy. Counterinsurgent, $10. Lord of the Rings podcast, I'm all in. Yeah, I haven't picked it for story hour, and people keep asking why. 90 minutes to discuss the Lord of the Rings. We need to do a whole month of it or something. Cam Cooksey, Austin Powers, Carney's scene, 19 seconds. This is why I don't trust Carney. The thing is, Cam, you sent me a clip from the SNL skit, Washington's Dream. So I don't know if you, hold on, what's he say here? You sent me the wrong clip. You buffoon. Love you, though. Tattooed Teacher, $20. Bay Theater Dave, I love the rabbit holes this episode has fallen into. Vikings, the occult, Malta, control of governments, and the Revolutionary Fathers. Great work, gentlemen. Yeah, if you're watching me at the end just rambling about random stuff as I start to fade out of consciousness, this happens. Watch this episode. It was good. Go back to the beginning. We were going to talk about stuff, and then we ended up talking about the X-Men and how it relates to everything that's been done to us. Still an X-Men fan. Aunt Samantha, late to the show because I just finished watching State of Mind, The Psychology of Control on YouTube. A must-see, in my opinion. God bless you and Matt. Thank you, Samantha. I have not heard of that, but thanks. Yeah, all right. Cam sent over the amended version, so we'll humor him. This is why Cam does not trust the fake Prime Minister of Canada. Oops.
Only two things scare me, and one is nuclear war.
What's the other?
Excuse me?
What's the other thing that scares you?
Carnies.
What?
Circus folk. Nomads, you know. Smell like cabbage. Small hands.
Man, Elizabeth Hurley in that movie. Mrs. Bright's sleeping. It's fine. Trust me, Mrs. Bright is super hot. So it's okay. She gets riled up when I do that anyway. That's why I always say, my marriage advice to young men out there, the only way out is through. Okay? You say something you shouldn't have said, you have to keep going. And if you die in the process, you will go to Valhalla. That's my philosophy. It hasn't worked yet, but it will work eventually. I just got to keep at it. Bitcoin at an all-time high of $121,000. So G-Money will probably be purchasing Badlands Media at some point, as well as all of our souls. And we will live in G-topia together. But he will be merciful to those of us who stood by him. And I was. You guys know I was. So I think I will be one of the last Badlanders enslaved by G in his new world. Can't say the same for all of you, though. Better do some soul searching. Ashley D. Thanks, guys. Wealth of information. Appreciate y'all. Thanks, Ashley. It amazes me that we can't come together for the kids. Well, I agree with you on that. I mean, you know, it is about that stuff. That's what weaponized me in the InfoWar. That's why ultimately, let's say Trump is being 100% like, the Epstein stuff is bullshit. Nobody cares about it. Maybe he's telling the truth about the psyops. It's one of the rails you got to build there. One of the rails you got to lay. All we can talk about, going with the Rorschach approach, all we can consider is what did it do for you? And I think most people in this audience would say, Epstein didn't send you down some rabbit hole that made you a worse person. It gave you a better understanding of how the deep state operates. It probably activated you on a moral, spiritual way. Certainly did for me. The first time I prayed ever, I think, or as an adult, was after going down that rabbit hole. First time ever. And I said, that I wanted to be of use if that stuff was true. Not just about Epstein, but that whole rabbit hole, right? And yeah, that was before Burning Bright and everything, so who knows? Mike, our toolmaker, gifted 5 subs. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate the support that you show to us over here. It does not go unnoticed. Sparrow64, $50. Happy summer and happy 50th anniversary of Jaws. Love the show. Yep, 50th anniversary of Jaws. Filmed not too far from me, actually. Sparrow, thanks for the support. John in Connecticut. The Stranger Things is another depiction of trauma-based experimentation on children. It's horrible predictive programming. Yeah, you know, it is. I mean, it's MK Ultra. It's the Montauk. It's basically the Montauk experiments. Stranger Things. Totally agree with you, but you know, as a fiction writer, man, I think I don't jump to conclusions about the intent of the shows because in my fiction I've written about dark stuff, you know, and you're not necessarily always, you don't know the artist's intent all the time. Sometimes it's really obvious, but I love all that kind of stuff because I don't think that, you know, it's all about not being controlled by the stories, right? If you are not controlled by the stories, if you know what you're watching, then they can be enlightening. They can be illuminating, even if you're watching enemy propaganda. It's a well-made show, but yeah, I'm not saying it's not subversive in any way. Babu Fiu, good show, man, for $10. Thank you. Astro Emmy, $17. Great discussion, so enjoyable and enlightening. Thank you very much, Astro. Mountain Mama, $10. Great show tonight. You and Matt make a great combo. Thank you. See, he was like, I might only be able to go 90 minutes tonight. I was like, all right, well, shouldn't have been wearing that, right? Shouldn't have been wearing that. He shouldn't have been dressed up all scholarly in his little cute library there, ready to go whole ham on the connections between the Hellfire Club and the Templars. You guys all saw it. It wasn't me. Tattooed Teacher, amazing show, $10. What a weave, A+ for effort. Thanks. You know what? It was effortless. We're that good. We are that good. So thank you. Saw this, $50. I deeply appreciate these conversations, BB. Two brilliant minds going down intuitive paths is my favorite thing in the world. Looking forward to seeing you both in Deadwood. Thank you. You know what? I think that is something that will always separate not just Badlands, but people who are communicating in an earnest manner from others. It's like Conning's never going to win and all this kind of stuff. You know, people find out, truth community and beyond, people find out who is saying stuff that they believe. Doesn't mean they have to be right. Are they saying stuff they believe, or are they saying stuff they think the audience wants to hear? There's a lot of that goes on all over the place. Mrs. Real Freedom Fighter, $50. Brilliant discussion tonight. I believe the founding fathers were aware of the deep state. I don't know it for a fact. I just know it's true. I totally agree with you. Man, I know it sounds so obvious, but I cannot get it out of my head. Like, these guys knew what was going on in a deeper way than we give them credit for. We're like, oh, they were fighting the British. No, they were fighting a decentralized, centralized, deep state cabal, and they knew it. So many analogs to the current times, I think. Bobby Few, again, while Epstein may really be a thing, the left is using him to clog the news. They're always saying, look here, while they do something over there, in my opinion. That's the third scenario I tried to lay out very awkwardly. One of those constellations. That's the one I'm mapping most. It was a real thing, but Trump is also being honest when he's like, guys, stop looking for the fucking list. Like, we're going to indict the former head of the FBI and CIA, hopefully. We'll see. Maybe that's another rug. But, like, looking for the list, it's not all roads lead to fuck the deep state, right? Biblically. So, I don't give a shit how it comes. I give a shit that it comes. And it's given people a lot of, again, all the usuals came out of the woodwork to condemn Trump. LL Danny, $10. I always appreciate your take on the swirling narratives out there. Badlands has kept me sane these past few years. Thank you. Can't wait for Deadwood. Gart, first timer. Awesome. Well, come up to me. Come up and introduce yourself, Danny. That's going to be a blast. Trying to figure out if Mrs. Bright and Baby Bright are coming. We just have to figure out what to do with Wolf Bright. A lot of Brights to manage these days. But, you know, I'll be there either way. And I think the whole family will be there. Counterinsurgent, absolutely brilliant show, BB. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys, for all the rants tonight. Really generous. I know it's tough. Trust me, it's tough on us lately. We thought like the financial trajectory at Badlands and just all of us doing this InfoWars stuff was going to go up after Trump. And I would say it's gone the opposite way. Like, just to let you guys in on that, it's not about us specifically, but the whole space. I even see on metrics in my day job, because I do still have a day job, online world, a lot of analytical data metrics, etc. Ad rates are down across the internet. So, you know, I'm one of the main cheerleaders of what Trump is doing with the economy, but I think he papers over that with a narrative because we all know, I mean, if you guys fucking pumped gas, like it's 11 cents cheaper, right? It was $1.70 when he was president the first time. So I think this stuff is coming, but I think that the economy does fucking suck right now. And, you know, I appreciate when you guys are donating and stuff, because I know a lot of you, you know, haven't been able to, and it's not easy. So it's very helpful to us, and it helps partly justify the time. We got, what do we have here? Devia, $20, more founding father history, please. I love it. Yeah, I am not an expert in this stuff, but I'm certainly fascinated to keep mining that pathway because it's so relevant to what's going on now. Mrs. Real Freedom Fighter, $50. Great messaging tonight, BB. Love it. Did I read that? If I didn't, then thank you. If I did, then thank you again. Bobby Few. Supposedly 10 people know the plan. One of them is not me. Thanks for the show. Good talk. That's a good way to put it. I like that. I like the swerve there. BB runs the best 7-Eleven in New England. Don't you forget. It's a Tedeschi's to you, Bay. They're not all gone yet. Micro Toolmaker, $55. Thanks, Micro. Where we go one, we go all. Sometimes, not always, but in spirit. Grease Monkey, I am so confused. Not really. Get her done. Okay. Nevada Runner with a thumbs up for $10. Thank you. And then I think there was a boost. By the way, if you guys don't want to use Rumble Rants, or if you are watching on replay and you want to support any of the shows at Badlands and have your question answered the next week, go to badlandsmedia.tv/boost, I believe. Yeah, /boost. And you can pick a show and leave a comment and a donation that way. So the narrative, VP Nichols sent $5 over. Any Kiwis or Aussies who want to connect to Badlands Down Under, please fill in the request form at badlandsmedia.tv/groups, and our group coordinators will get in touch. All right, there you go. Yeah, it's nuts. We have Badlands groups all over the place. Different countries, like 48 states or something. That's crazy. I got to go to the Massachusetts one. I haven't been able to, but I will try to go to a meetup that they're doing. And then VP Nichols also sent one over. $10. I used to think the smear campaign against DJT was a failed narrative, but the more I listen to BB, the more I think DJT needed the smear campaign. Was the smear campaign actually a successful narrative forwarded by DJT? I like that, and I've long believed that they fell into some Trump quicksand when they conflated Donald Trump with Vladimir Putin. They were trying to do it to arm that narrative. I think what they did is prepped the mind for that narrative, which is why it's been the narrative I've been most interested in. Which leads me to the end of the show and to a piece of writing I put out today that I want to share with you guys. This is on, I'm not going to read the whole thing here. It will literally take me 2 hours. Don't let that stop you from reading, guys. Don't be afraid of reading stuff. It's good. burningbright.substack.com, my newest feature, Axis and Allies, Flirting with War on the Path to Peace. This is a piece about the Sovereign Alliance, our boys, and more importantly, how is the current narrative battle space unfolding? How is it prepping us for supposedly World War III? Look at this Volodymyr Zelensky, our boy Z comms here. Oh no, baby Bright. Go back to sleep. Yeah, well. Okay, he's going back to sleep. I think we're good. I think we're good. Nice. Cute little fella. No one's been able to stop Putin. Only Trump remains. He might be able to. Yeah, well, what is he saying there? Putin's saying that Trump's the best. Putin says, I deeply respect Trump. He's a courageous man who survived 2 assassination attempts. I believe he truly wants peace in Ukraine and the Middle East, though it may be harder than he expected. Does that map onto some of the stuff we talked about tonight? Is Trump operating in a difficult narrative battle space? Anyway, check that out if you want. You can support my work over there if you choose to. burningbright.substack.com. Please also support our friends at badlands.substack.com. I am the editor over here. Ash manages the news brief ever since Baby Bright arrived. She and Ghost supply commentary, plus commentary from the rest of the team. We got, Chris gets in here. Everybody gets in here. And if you're not terminally on social media, these are great summaries. The previous day's big articles and big narrative deployments that really interest the Badlands team. We compile them all here. Ash puts them together, and we get some sort of button commentary from everybody on what they think of it. So it's a good sort of table setter. If you read it on Wednesday morning, it's talking about Tuesday's narrative deployments, and I think it really helps prep you for the psyops of that day and the narrative deployments. So check it out. And speaking of the brief, our latest long form is from the guy I just talked to in defense of Abraham Lincoln and the Greenbacks, Matt Ehret, writing some provocative stuff for us lately. Yeah. I guess that's it. I got to learn how to end shows better. I just kind of do this. Yes, I have bought the rights back to one of my series. There'll be more information to follow on that. It is not an InfoWar thing. It's just a fun fictional story, but it does tie into a lot of the themes we talk about here. So, hope you guys will support that endeavor, but I'll have more details on that soon. Trying to launch a publishing company while working the job, while working at Badlands, while putting out the content. It's a lot, but that's why we do it. That's why we do it. All right, guys, thank you so much. A lot of generous support tonight. Please share the show if you liked it. Just tell them to not stop watching after Matt leaves. And hit the thumbs up button. Do all the things that you like to do. And, just take the Rorschach approach this week. Maybe a Dr. Manhattan vibe, but the Rorschach center. Just chill. Chill in moral certitude. And then the InfoWar can't affect you. Oh, we got a rant at the end. The final demand, $20. Fucking great show, thank you. I needed a break from all the retarded black pillars. We need a movie about the OG George Washington played by the Kylo Ren guy. Really? Do you think Adam Driver looks like George Washington? Interesting. Huh. He's a good actor. In some terrible Star Wars movies, but good actor. Yeah, thank you guys. I'm glad you liked the conversation in the episode. So, what was I thinking about? Yeah, fiction's really important to me. I ended with that Watchmen scene. I ended the fake ending because I think fiction is the purest form of truth-telling that we have. Because fiction is honest about what it is. Fiction is not pretending to be real. And even when we are engaging with Patriot deployments, we all acknowledge that they are largely misleading us, even if they are misleading us to the truth. And sometimes you need a little break from that. And I think fiction is a great way to... The enemy uses it too, right? It's just a tool, like anything. The enemy uses fiction to influence culture. I like the Harry Potter books, but man, now I'm like, oh, there was a lot of occult bullshit in there. Still might be able to engage with them. But I'm trying, my writing in the fiction realm is more, I think you guys would dig it. It's entertaining stuff. It's not all steeped in InfoWar stuff, but I think it's got the moral center. The heroes that I grew up really idolizing are fictional heroes, largely. And I'm not ashamed of that. I was very inspired as a young boy, dealing with my own troubles, as we all do, by Aragorn and, Bruce Lee, who's not fictional, but his characters, right? All those kinds of things. So I think we got to take culture back. That starts with stories. And if you observe the InfoWar and what Trump does from the perspective of a master storyteller, and you believe, even if you don't know what Trump is trying to do with a narrative deployment, here's where I'll end things. If you believe that his intentions, the narrative intent, is good, you believe in the intent of the man, you don't have to worry about it as much, even if you can have fun analyzing it. And I think, that's where I'll leave you. Grease Monkey with $20. When are you going to tell us how you really feel? Yeah, I'm working my way up to it. I'd also say that Final Demand said the retarded black pillars need a break from the retarded black pillars. As we've talked about on Badlands and been absolutely flamed for it, white pillars can be as bad as black pillars. And I consider myself a white pillar, although white pillars consider me a black pillar, right? You know what I'm talking about. Toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is such that my interpretation of what's going on, because it's positive, automatically renders yours that is not the same thing as a black pill. And we also have to be careful about that sort of binary, that false binary that can happen. It's possible that there's more going on here than full control in the way some people think about it, and we're doomed. Nobody would be at Badlands if we thought we were doomed. But nobody would be at Badlands if we thought there was full control to the degree that none of us had any say or power to impact the future of our country. And to think otherwise is absolutely retarded. And chronic white pillars and toxic positivity people will tell you that they believe we have a role to play, but also that you're not allowed to question what the plan is, or where it's going, or what your role in it is. So just be a sovereign, be an American, be an adult, be a human being, and, do whatever you want to do. 2 more rants in for you. All right, as I always say, the war is a story. The story is a war. Act accordingly. I'll see you next week.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, now it's here.
How many men have you killed, Malone?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. Were you rested in your cradle of power? You were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope! We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened. So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all. You forbade me. John, I do not know what strength is in my life. I swear to you, I will not let the light city fall. Our people failed. Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.